instead I just invested deep in the Super iPad and pencil, Apple Pencil. So.
You're going in the wrong direction, Andrew.
Hybrid. It's a hybrid model.
Since we're in silence, hi Joe.
I have it. I don't have this iPad is just for that. So I've got to email myself the link and then text it to the iPad, and then I can get on the Mural.
All right, so we're now live. I'm going to post the link to the SCI-Arc channel. If any of you have family, friends, colleagues who would like to watch this morning's review, we are going to be split into two different groups. So only one of them will be streaming, the one with myself and Maxi Spina, but hopefully that gives everybody a chance to understand what the studio did. And that link should be now in the chat. So we're going to start with a kind of short introduction altogether, and then introduce our guests, and then split into two rooms. We'll post one more Zoom link in about 10 minutes so that some of us will have to kind of split into two rooms a little bit awkwardly. But what would be very nice is for those of you who are able to stay a little bit longer, we'll come back together as one large class and have a broader discussion about the studio and about the kind of the work of the students and the kind of collaborative work that we've done together. But to introduce, I am Anna Neymark. I was working in the 4A studio together, very collaboratively with Maxi Spina. And if everybody maybe just briefly introduce yourself so that your face pops up on the screen.
Hello.
Hi, Maxi, and Tom Wiscombe.
Hi, everyone. Tom Wiscombe, faculty at SCI-Arc.
Harvik Baumgartner.
Faculty. Hello, everybody.
Sam Flower, who is assisting in Tom's section.
Yeah, I think he's here.
Hi, guys. What's going on?
Hey, Sam. And a huge kind of shout out goes out to the teaching assistants, Julie Riley. She might still be in the background, and Renee Perez Ignacio. Both of them have been amazing. And of course, with Sam's help, we were able to really make this a kind of super interactive studio environment. And I'm going to introduce briefly the project because in 4A, this semester, this was very new brief. And we really look forward to hearing from all of you, not only about kind of individual student work, but also about the brief itself and the way in which we've considered it this semester. So we're working on the Veteran Administration campus. It's in West Los Angeles. And it was built in the end of the 19th century as a home for veterans and as a campus as well. So kind of sanctuary for housing and for medical care. With time and over time, many more buildings were added. So you can see that the collection of buildings on this campus ranges from balloon frame wood construction to stone to the third image is the federal building on Wilshire that we all know and love. An old church. There are many buildings that are meant to be preserved on this campus, but then also others that are in quite a bit of disrepair and in need of revitalization. The entire campus from the kind of exterior right now looks a little bit like this. And so that kind of old pastoral landscape confronts the realities of some of the current problems of Los Angeles quite directly. In that the veterans and their families who are here to have support of the medical system and to have support of the services often also end up living on the streets and especially on the sidewalks around the campus to such a degree that even the Veteran Administration has issued army-style tents to some of those living on the streets. And you can see the buildings, some of them in the background. Many stand empty, others are quite full, and always in the kind of state of transition from some sort of old monument to a new piece of infrastructure. And those kinds of topics will come up as we go through some of the projects today. There is an attempt right now, and kind of many lawsuits have taken place to transfer some of the public funding forward to the construction of a new master plan and a new housing. So that's something as a kind of aside. We've taken the idea of the master plan apart quite a bit because we weren't thinking of somebody coming in from above and kind of placing a master plan, a kind of mastery of some planning onto the site. And rather we thought about this as a kind of collective and collaborative experience. So we look toward images such as this one of the exquisite corpse by André Breton, Jacqueline Lamba, Jeanette Tanguy, and Yves Tanguy from 1938 as a way to assemble the campus pieces and the buildings into some sort of form. And of course, we're also leaning a little bit on the work of the late Michael Sorkin, whose studios used the same kind of metaphor of the exquisite corpse to think through the collection of kind of lines through the city as a way to stitch together different students' work and different ideas. In our case, and this is very relevant to, I guess, working now in the Zoom environment and being quite a bit far apart from one another, we thought of the campus, and here you see that the 405 runs here, Wilshire Corridor is here. The campus, for the most part, falls into 4 quadrants, but we looked at quadrant number 1 over here for the most part, because that's where the main kind of old campus was located, and that's where most of the program takes place. The cemetery is in quadrant 2. Most of the Wilshire Federal Building is here. It's located here somewhere, just south of Wilshire, and then most of the medical facilities are in 4 over here. What we did is we thought about this as a kind of field of projects. And so each student selected one of the puzzle pieces, and quite literally, we worked within the space of that lot, such that when we kind of came back together, we were able to actually stitch this, drawing together. These are some of the models that we were able to make with the help of the shop. So a huge shout out to Rodney Rojas, Rodney and everybody on his team, Brendan and Nick, because many of them were helping us throughout this time. And we brought the models together. So we were not able to be together, but our models are all in a way together, holding hands in this environment in Keck. And we were able to think about the way in which some of these buildings can begin to interact with one another and begin to kind of stitch certain connections across the landscape, across the campus. And so what we were hoping to do today is spend the first couple of hours talking about the student works individually, and then return to some of these bigger images and clusters of projects in order to discuss the adjacencies and what makes a campus an actual kind of holistic experience. I'd like to, and Herwig, Maxi, Tom, Sam, please jump in if I have missed anything. I'd like to introduce the jury before we split into groups, or rather I'd like to ask the jury to introduce themselves, but I'll just kind of bring your name up, and then perhaps you could speak a little bit and say hello. So Lance Collins.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Where do I want to start? Licensed architect, director at a consulting company called Partner Energy. We focus on like sustainable design and things like that. And Anna, you actually don't know this, but we're actually working with the current developers at the VA site right now on a couple buildings out there. So I'm very familiar with this project.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I knew that you would be the right person to come here this morning. John Cooper is joining us.
Hi everybody, I'm a faculty in history and theory at SCI-Arc and graduate thesis coordinator.
Welcome. Joe Day.
Hi Anna, thank you. I also teach at SCI-Arc, though I don't think I've had the students in this class. I have a practice, Deegan Day Design, and I think my closest tie to this project, and it is a distant one. When I was 12 years old, I often skateboarded through the VA to get from my house to.
Where?
I grew up in West LA. Actually,
to get from your house to where?
To Westwood to go see.
Westwood.
Yeah. Actually, in any case, I know it pretty well.
So you know the campus well.
The marathon runs through it as well.
That's true. That's true. Florencia Pita.
Hi, everybody. You guys, the brief sounds great, so I'm looking forward to seeing. And it's amazing to see those models in the building. So my name is Florencia Pita. I'm faculty at SCI-Arc. I'm teaching 2CIX at this moment, and I also teach visual studies. I'm not sure, maybe I got some of the students. I don't see the full list on my BS previous years, but, and I'm the principal of Florencia Pita and Company. Thank you, guys. That's Mika. That's my dog, my new dog. So it's annoying.
Andrew Zago.
Hi, that's me. I'm Andrew Zago. I'm a principal of Bauman Zago Architecture here in Los Angeles, and also faculty at SCI-Arc. In fact, my vertical studio is pretty much across the street from this. We had a review on Tuesday, and it's the West LA Civic Center on Santa Monica. So we did a walking tour with my studio, socially distant walking tour of the whole site.
Oh, that's so cool. And I've watched your final, so it's very nice to have this kind of uncoordinated but adjacent
accidental
link.
Coordination.
Yes. Tess Banco. I haven't seen Tess, but if you're here, say hello. Tess may be joining us a little bit later. She's working with the veterans, and she, for us, represents a little bit the other side of a non-architect in the room. David Rue. David probably will be joining us in a bit as well. He's a director of the post-professional program here in SCI-Arc. We're also joined, so this will be the kind of the morning session, and on the Maxi and Anna side, in Herwig's and Tom's group, we have Angelica Lorenzi.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Anna, for the invite. Yeah, I'm also design faculty here at SCI-Arc. I taught this semester 2A in the undergrad program.
Thanks, Angelica. William Virgil.
Hi, everyone. My name is William Virgil. I'm 2GAX faculty, and I'm also the Making a Mini coordinator. Thank you for the invite, Anna.
Yahua Wang.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yahua Wang, and I'm a faculty at USC and a SCI-Arc veteran, actually.
And Yahua, it's so good to meet you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Bruno Jurcic. Bruno, I hope you're here. And if you're not, Bruno will be joining us in a bit. He was well known here in LA until he moved back to his hometown in former Yugoslavia, and hopefully he will be here soon. Eric Ganoyu.
Hi, everyone. So it's Eric Ganoyu, the History and Theory faculty and coordinator of research.
Hey, Eric, good to see you.
See you.
Hernandez Alonso. Hi, Hernan.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everybody. Hernandez Alonso, director of SCI-Arc.
Thanks for being here. And I think in a bit, we'll also be joined by Peter Trummer, who is faculty here at SCI-Arc and hopping between different Zoom windows this morning. I think that's everybody. I want to also say special thanks. We have a couple of students, SCI-Arc students in the room who are also in the military. So I think there will be some of those viewing also who are veterans. I want to welcome everybody. And with that, Perhaps, Hervig, would you be able to post the SCI-Arc Zoom link for your room in the chat so that we can split into 2 groups?
Let's see. I think I've got it right here.
I can do it, actually. I've just found it.
Yeah, I think I just did it.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, I just posted it too.
And I have
Sorry,
also
I was
posted.
trying to email.
No
Bruno.
worries.
Okay, should we remind each jury where they have to go or they have to stay, or do you think everybody knows?
It's on here now. Yeah.
I have placed in the link. Hernan, maybe you would like to jump between the 2 reviews, or for now, perhaps join Hervig and Tom, especially since Bruno is a little bit late. So we'd love to have you in both rooms somehow. One foot in, one foot out.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much. And everybody else can stay in this room, so you don't have to log out.
Okay, so we'll move over to my room. Thanks, Anna, for the introduction. It was awesome. Thank you. See you later.
Hervig,
thank you. See you later.
You have the Mural Board link to share with everyone? I'll just paste it here again.
I do not know.
Okay, yeah. I just pasted it there again, so maybe you can grab it from the chat.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. All right, so Hassini, would you like to start? Are we ready?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll share my screen now. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hassini. So here's my project. My site is located in the south of VA campus above Wilshire. Currently, there's an abandoned theater and a council administration, which used to be a collective space for the veterans. And here's my project related to other people's puzzle pieces. I began the project by looking into statistics and came across the fact that not only military families require more support than any other civilian families, but particularly single veteran parents are more likely to struggle in housing problems. Another important information when looking into the research is that the children of the veterans are more likely to face child maltreatment that includes both abuse and neglect. Hence, I want my site to offer a space where military children and their family can get support from one another. My program proposes small family homes that are arranged to create playground and shared space and keep the children safe but not isolated. With the courtyard arrangement, the site pulls away from the street and creates its own neighborhood. The process of designing the small houses begin with a precedent study, where the studio looked at large public building and made a mill model. My partner Tamara and I made a mill model where the floor plans are broken down into parts, and I later became interested in the playfulness of the model parts and how they come together to create larger pieces. I used this playfulness of the model photographs to look into the house arrangement and began to draw the profiles in plan view, starting off with rigid organization of the house with thick wall and empty middles for living space. Gravity that happens in elevation is now introduced into plan. The drawings are thought of in terms of model, where materials and stability are considered. So once a house meets its neighbor, the space between them serves as both circulation and collective space. So they do not only share entry, but they also share living space. In the process of making models, I explored a way in which graphic quality in the line drawings can be part of the physical model. Thick lines from the plan became little tapes that hold the model together. Then I later looked into how the tape can play a role in constructing a house. In this model, the yellow graphic that was a tape is translated into model tectonics, giving support and structures to the surfaces. The house is a one-story home, but it has two-story height. Hence, the space between the room and the roof allows the children to climb up the house and occupy it as their own play space. And here's the interior view looking over to the playground in the middle. So the parent can be looking at their children when they're playing. And here's physical model. The programs are thought of in terms of model, where each piece gets assigned a room and paper. Is used to create privacy for the inhabitants as well as to hold the pieces together. So here's the paper connecting the two homes together, and the living space is shared. From one side of the house is seen as one house, but from the entrance they are separated with shared living space in the middle. The two houses are held together by its connected shell that hides interior for privacy, and the two houses share roof, envelope, and the entry. Once the two houses open the door, the living will meet and become connected through the boardwalk. And here's the bedroom at the back and living space in front of the entrance. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
That's
Hasni.
all. Yeah.
Hasni, do you think do you have the Mural board as well? Does it make sense to pull it up?
Yeah, I can pull it up.
Speak? Thanks.
Sure. One second.
Are they all, I'm sorry, Hasani, are they all double units? Some of them are kind of L-shaped.
They are all double units.
And so how many double units altogether? I can count 1, 2.
There are 19 homes in total.
What's that? I'm sorry, what was that?
There are 20 homes in total
20.
and 2 units each.
Hasni or Anna will be, it's one at a time, I take it?
Yes.
Yes, thanks.
Yes, it's one at a time. Sorry, we forgot to say that.
Hasni, could you talk about the translucency of your project and the degree to which it's pretty thoroughly translucent?
Right. When I was looking into the research, part of the thing that I saw was an interview with some children saying that they feel more comfortable when social workers or when the public see them being with an adult because of the child abuse and stuff that can happen behind closed doors. So they just feel more comfortable being seen than being hide away.
I guess my other question would be about the oblique geometries. Like where can you talk a little bit about how you've ended up with this, with the what's governing the kind of shallow diagonals through your project?
Oh, so when I was developing the model, the physical model, I used paper to cover the two houses and connected them together. I can show it to you in my presentation. So when the paper are folded, they're kind of just at an angle, and they just kind of just wrap around the house and create this like oblique geometry.
If you stay 1 minute, I don't know, Joy, if you, I don't want to interrupt you, or that was a question.
Please go ahead.
I just wanted to make a note on this image before it goes away. I'm not sure where the yellow frame came. You know, like there's something about opacity and translucency that is quite amazing. A moire effect that you're getting in this model. Is this physical model? With zoom, I'm zooming in. This model is fantastic, and you know, like I don't know where one material starts. I'm not sure whether they're solid, the objects inside, and so on. But then when you look at the final project, there's a yellow frame that maybe is necessary for construction, but it's like it delineates the whole project. That it's that I think that it kind of it loses the sense of kind of abstraction that this model has. Sorry they interrupted, but I just wanted to point out that from this image.
Can I'm going to ask a dumb question, maybe it's a general one. I'm just looking at the site plan. I know these things are 363 feet across, and yours seems to diagonally kind of fill that out. My guess is, and I want to talk about but I think it's a very interesting project, and I want to talk about that in a minute. I'm just wondering though, when you talk about the need that it's addressing, 20 doesn't sound like enough, given the scale of the project. Then when I look at it, well, surely there's room for a lot more than this on one of these chunks. And then I look, and you pretty much fill up the site with this. And I'm just wondering, am I missing the scale or something? Or
no, I wasn't really trying to fit a lot of people into the space, but more of like giving a lot of space to this group of people, because it's for better, like single veteran parents.
Oh yeah, no, I get that. I just suddenly thought, oh my God, well, if it's only 10 people, there must be a lot of room left over on the site. And I looked, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of room left over. So I thought maybe I'm missing I realize I don't have a sense of the scale. 363 feet.
Yeah, I was going to ask maybe a similar question to add on to that, which was kind of going back to your program. When you're talking about, you know, veterans housing and families that, you know, are transitioning with mental health issues, different things like that, one of the things you always have to talk about is sort of supportive housing and sort of the social services that go with that. So it's a little bit in between sort of a low density housing development, and maybe I feel like there's an opportunity to have more programmatic elements outside of the housing. So if you could just maybe talk a little bit more about what are the common areas, what are those spaces as they're shown or as they're intended to be?
Yeah, the common area is the courtyard in the middle, and when the social workers come and visit the children or to check on the family, they're gonna be in the living area, which is pretty transparent to the public. But the blue space marked is the intimate space in the house. The rest of them is kind of used for public.
Right, and then the common areas in between the sort of the paired buildings, it looks like that's just kind of play areas and things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's open for anything.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, my kind of first comment or question is really maybe just a programmatic one, sort of thinking about what other types of program elements could have been mixed into this to utilize more of the site maybe, or sort of fill in some of those play areas with supportive services for the families and the kids, not just sort of, play areas, but whether it's, whatever, remote clinics, or whether it's, office space, or whether it's, whatever it is, to kind of build a smaller sort of micro scale community in this particular site, instead of having to have somebody go all the way to another part of the campus to get different services. So that's kind of the first.
Yeah, I think when I was looking into the project, I was kind of wanting to make it more of a housing than a facility, so that the children don't feel like they are confined in a strict program. But I also took into consideration the fact that like these parents could be relying on one another. So let's say a parent is busy, they can go to the neighbor's house and have their children being taken care of, like having the children being looked after while they're running errands or doing something else.
Right. Yeah, I think that part makes sense to me as far as sort of the shared, sort of whatever we're going to call it, co-living, sort of unit space in between for that level of sort of visibility. I think the other comment I was going to make is I think I understand sort of the concept of the sort of paper wrapping around both units that you have in the model. And I like the way that sort of element exists, but sort of somehow when it translates into the sort of 3D version, into the sort of more polished design, I personally get a little bit lost in the materiality on that. It kind of just reads as a fence or a grid or something like that, which I don't know if that should have been maybe that literal of a translation between sort of the paper wrapping idea and some sort of screening or fencing, in some of those three bottom images, whether that could have been sort of executed in some other type of material that still could, provide some level of translucency or some sort of pattern in there. I think maybe would have helped it not seem, to me, it seems a little bit institutional with that, the way it's sort of rendered with that fencing on the perimeter.
Yeah, I agree. I think, personally, I think your intuition in terms of the program, the scale, the need, the studies are all really on. Somehow the translation gets a little singular, maybe. I agree with what Lance is saying, and I know that's not. It doesn't seem, and maybe this is also what Florencia is saying, it doesn't seem like it would have added up to that, and it becomes just a little overstated maybe, and singular, and some of the ambiguities of the earlier work is lost. But I think, in overall, I find it really, if I see the entire presentation, it's quite beautiful.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Passini. I think it's a very interesting conversation, and I appreciate so much kind of also Florencia's comment about the kind of looseness in some of the early studies that for sure will probably stay with you for some time. And some of the things that Lance brought up in terms of programming and trying to understand the collective spirit of the place that you've set up and how to bring more supportive programming into the site. I think that is a really powerful way to think about programming. So thank you. I wanted to mention also, and this is something that I forgot to say in the introduction, is that in the studio, each student not only worked on a different kind of adjacent site, but also had to write their own program, their own kind of idea and intuition for the master plan. So in many ways, even setting up the idea of this kind of shared housing, of thinking of the boardwalk as the center, as Passini has done, it was all part of her own thinking of how to situate a project. So next, we're going to see Yanbin.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, I'm Yun. prosthesis. Before going into my project, I will briefly introduce one of a formal exercise we did in the beginning of semester for the studio. We began looking into the Beaux-Arts buildings, and Chen-Yu and I decided to analyze the floor plans and sections of the open stations, and implement our own logic and analysis of grids and spatial quality of the open station into the plans and sections. And later our studio did a collective motherboard drawings of all the Beaux-Arts buildings together. After looking into the 2D, we began to imagine to think the Penn Station into a 3D model and into a physical model as chunks and fully assembled building. And these are the open stations in parts and the details being assembled. So we were so from this exercise, I was most interested of how the parts came together into a single mass, and these intricate parts begin to see a relationship of prosthesis, as well as in the VA campus. I feel there's a need of prosthesis fabrication and research lab, as well as a place for the veterans to get their prosthesis after amputations. And these are some of the inspirations of the past and the past of the timeline of prosthesis arms. And this is the current day prosthesis and the future. Some of the machines that used to produce these prostheses are limbs and arms. So my building is located at the north central campus of the VA campus. And my masking begins looking at the open stations in unfolding them and folding them and mirroring them within one another and creating this kind of a W massing. And later it was stacked and having a typology of 8 towers and 2 slabs, where at the moment it's plain, and and at certain part it reveals the inside component of the building. And these components, I imagine them as little parts that relates back to the prosthesis and some of the massing models. Roof plans, axons. My building mainly considered of focus on research lab, as well as housing for the patients that are in need for getting their prosthesis done, as well as helping them to recover, where it will be mainly on the horizontal slabs. Some of the plan drawing. Here are the plan cutting the fabrication, as well as the partial of the research lab, and showing the recovery center, where the veterans could get their daily recovery after getting amputees, and some of the units. And I began to develop the building into thinking them as parts as well, and milling them into chunks. Then later having these kind of 3D inserts to kind of 3D parts to insert into the mill chunks to have a differentiation of tectonic quality, where one's highly specific and technical, while the mill chunk is much more rougher and much more abstract. And some of the assemblies. And this is the staircases going within the within floors. Thank you.
Can you go to your section for a second?
Yep.
And forward again. There's a bunch of stuff that's not on the Mural board, right?
Yeah, I had some technical issue of exporting some stuff, so I didn't update the Mural board yet. Sorry about that.
It's interesting to me, and I imagine this is going to be a little bit the case as we see more of these puzzle pieces, that among other things, this is really a kind of, it's a little bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for, a kind of genetic sampling of different density strategies for the site. And here, I mean, the precedent that this one gets closest to is actually the Neutra building on the east side of the 405, the federal building. Sorry, not quite enough coffee yet. But you know, I think, and it was interesting to me, the previous one with the duplex housing, it really does seem to speak to this moment. And the housing crisis that we're in. This one, I mean, I suppose both are in that direction, but the solution of this one takes on a kind of mid-century density that's pretty rare in that, you know, pretty rare in that swath of the city at this point, but probably something we're building towards as we see a proliferation of 3 to 5 story housing all over the place. I think beyond that kind of general sense of, like, I guess each puzzle piece is a petri dish is what I was trying to kind of get at. And I like the setup a lot. I think here, my question would actually run much more specific, which is about the kind of tripartite organization of what I read to be, you know, the 3 bars of the block and why they're organized as they are. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, you mean the 3 vertical blocks?
Yeah, the 3 slabs that make the block.
Yeah, I was thinking of them as overlays where, like, opposite blocks will have a communication where, since the central is the factor is the assembly and the manufacturing of the components, and the other 2 sides will be the medical and the research lab. They will be having kind of this kind of abstract way of communicating within one another over having this kind of interlay interaction between one another blocks. I think that's.
And you may have shown it. I'm sorry if I missed it, but I'm wondering, in terms of your site, are you anywhere near Wilshire by any chance?
No, I'm not like at the central of the North Campus.
Okay.
I believe Wilshire is somewhere here.
Okay. I'm curious just because, again, I think the density that you're proposing has a real, you know, has a kind of, like, on Wilshire, this wouldn't be kind of morphologically remarkable, but anywhere far off the Wilshire corridor, I think this would establish a very different architectural framework as you move further north, and I think that's interesting.
Okay.
I wonder whether if you go back to your physical model, 1 second.
The Masting or
the mill model, the pink model. No? Yeah. So
this one?
I wonder, yes, this one. So I wonder whether the fact that the milling machine has a constraint, which is that unless you flip it, you know, if you were in school, you might do it, but unless you flip it, you can only mill from one side. So it seems as if the constraint that the medium has, which is the router of the machine has. The project ended up having that same constraint. I mean, there's a kind of linearity between the model and the final product, where when you look at the axle, if you go next, because this is a render, if you go to, you created the balconies, but actually it's a kind of blank facade. Like it has no windows, it's everything towards that courtyard, that center courtyard. I mean, when you look at it like this, I see small windows, but they don't have any detail. There's just, I mean, they don't appear actually in the drawings. So conceptually, it seems that it's looking at itself. I mean, I'm not sure how it would happen. So the transfer of information from one medium to the other one, which will be from the physical model to this, which is, it seems to be quite relevant in this class. I think that you miss an opportunity, because not in section, but there's one where there's a slippages between one facade and the other one. They don't close as a cloister, but they slip. And you see the inside as a cut. This, okay, hold on 1 second there. This is really great. Like this, like the street makes you cut. I wish there were more cuts like that. Like you were sliced as if you, so in a way, you still accept you have the blank facades to the outside, but you reveal that inside, which your project is really doing really well when it has to cut it because there's a road. But then here it doesn't, because it goes parallel. So if you had located this building in more awkward manner, you would have had to use like a knife the streets, and it would have revealed that amazing interior that you have. Like when you cut a pepper, the outside of the pepper is very smooth, but inside is amazing and detailed. So it's like, you have a pepper project in a way. And so I think the model is amazing. I wish you would have treated it, a bit more at the massing level. I mean, and I'm not talking about programming and anything. I'm talking about basic massing first, and then everything else comes. I'm going to clean this stuff. Okay, there you go.
No, go ahead.
I think like sorry for saying. I think for the masking, I think I was much more interested like this kind of a heavy contrast with the very blank facade. Than when you're actually having a certain degree looked in, there will be this kind of highly this would be detail, or kind of this kind of junks that you kind of spill out from the building. But yeah, definitely I will look more into like maybe having more cuts or so. Thank you.
Yunbin, I think it's really interesting to me that you've chosen a kind of prosthetics center. And in one of the slides you showed some of the prostheses which are in operation, about people who have lost limbs and so on. And for me, that opens up a very interesting question, but which you didn't address in your presentation, and I'm not sure whether you addressed in your design, which is the different modes of mobility and access which people of different abilities have to architecture. You showed lots of stairs, for example, and I'm like, well, are those kind of navigable by people with prostheses? And I think the prospect of kind of designing for an anti-ableist constituency is a really powerful and important one, which exists perhaps most intensively on this site in a way that it may not so obviously on others. And I just wonder, was that, did the kind of, did the ability or things like ableism or disability, CRIP, the idea of the CRIP and CRIP technology, did any of that play a part in your design process and thinking? And are there any areas of your project that kind of particularly address that?
Regarding the CRIP technology, I don't think so. It played parts, but I was more looking into definitely prosthesis as components and parts. And regarding to like the what do you call the disability regardless, I think definitely it's not 100% resolved, but the stairs at the moment is currently more served as a design purpose, but the disabled are still offered with the elevator cores and having enough elevators to access the building without having much issue, if that answers the question.
Well, yeah, in a way, I'd say one critique could be you kind of miss an opportunity by kind of segregating the apparently able from the apparently disabled and producing two kind of segregated classes of beings. Whereas I think what it means to be able-bodied or disabled-bodied is actually a very continuous spectrum with many different gradations. And I think, to me, just looking at the building, I think that's something that would be really fascinating actually to explore, is how do people move around space who have prosthetic limbs, and how does one design for them and with them?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Definitely will look more into it.
Thank you, John. Sorry, I know you guys have a lot of comments, but we have a kind of tight schedule. We will see two of my students now. I wanted to say just something very quickly about the framework of our section. I asked my students to consider a congestion of heterogeneous urban typologies after we reread Rowe and Coetter's Collage City. Essentially to consider the tensions existing between the notion of an object and the notion of urban fabric, two terms that that we throw around when talking about urban composition. And congestion is a term that we borrow from Rem's writing in Delirious New York, but in our context, the context of a campus as an urban model, we have understood congestion as kind of a density of mass as well as density without mass. That meaning that the landscape and the structure of open spaces that modulate campuses will need to produce a kind of plurality of configurations and associations. I asked my students to be typologically specific in the question of the structures that punctuate campuses, and they also needed to study different notions of urban themes that might bring together these three different conditions, object, fabrics, and landscape into kind of meaningful interfaces. So Leo and then Lou, we'll see one at a time, and I'll keep time again. Okay.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Leo. I start with my puzzle. My puzzle is located at the corner of the site, including an old theater, parking lot, and a part of Riven. The massing starts from an edge shape with atrium typology building, using different ways to cut of cutting and reconnecting to make the new corridor and threshold spaces, and study about how to place the massing to create more spaces. The massing now becomes not only a space that people can occupy in between, but also becomes the ground that people can walk on the top, a roof that generates the space on the ground. The program for the building are parks, housing, markets, and theater on the ground. Starting from the ground, a new VA campus entrance is created in order to connect with South Barrington Avenue, allowed people to enter the campus from the west east. The ground of my site is not only serves public activities like roads, but also a container that contains space on the ground. The grass pattern blurs the boundary of the massing and also the ground, at the same time geometrically creating a city pattern. The grass pattern generates the shape of the park, making the separation for a more quiet public space. In between the massing, there are markets, cafes, and the continuous folded circulation. Residents are separated vertically. There's a composer plan that shows the space and the program in between the massing. There are 3 entrances that you can enter the building from different directions. Large entrances create a semi-closed market space that allow people to walk inside and outside. Circulations are continuous and folded in order to let people wander around in the building horizontally. Residents are separated vertically to have more privacy. The core connects to the ground, the market, and the resident. So the market and becomes a community of the residents at the bottom. When the masting is sunken on the ground, it naturally forms an underground space. This is a model picture. The underground program is a theater. People can enter the theater from the ground. There are two theaters. Both theater has its own entrance. The box office, concession stands, and the bottom of the folded masting would be the roof of the theater, like the dash line. The building sometimes separate with the ground to leave a gap there to let the skylight into the underground spaces. The idea of the building is that the building is not a building itself, but form a space underground and generate space in between, give an open space on the top. The texture is not a facade on the building, but also graphically generates a garden space, create an urban fabric. All the ideas are meant to study a new version of urban idea on how to expand public and private spaces vertically and horizontally based on a certain pattern. That's all. Thank you.
Can you go back to your slideshow? The first couple.
The first.
No, the third one, number 3. What is I don't know that typology, H shape with atrium. Where is the atrium?
Like a garden.
Oh, it's not like a walled thing with glass on top, or?
No.
What?
I Googled it, so Google says there's a typology like this.
I think there's an H shape with an atrium. There's probably a typology like you drew, and I think they're not the same. I'm just curious because I think, I'm just going into the typological specificity that that Maxi was mentioning, because and then they sort of, once they became
That's
separate.
the hospital barracks.
What's that?
It's the hospital barracks typology. Wouldn't it be like hospital typology?
A hospital
like
typology. But
yeah, it's like the linking, and then you have all the, so.
But in atrium, you've got walls on all sides of you, and either open or glass above you.
Leo creating her own language on that, so that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. And then it becomes independent. It's not attached anymore, and then it becomes these hills. They become round, and then they become hills. I guess what I'm wondering, there's a lot of formal, what would be the word for it? Action and ambition in it. And my only concern is it seems to have made just more problem conditions than giving new opportunities through the shaking. Like I'd like to say, and now, because it shakes, this is what happens in section that never happened at an old-fashioned H shape with an atrium. You know what I mean? You have this very, very large space underneath, but that doesn't seem to be a consequence of the typological manipulation of it. I'm just pointing out, let me put it this way. I appreciate the ambition and I'm sympathetic to the formal ambitions of your project. So I'm just pointing out parts where it seems to have not carried through. Like if I see the green carpets on top of the building, which doesn't show up in this diagram, that seems far more convincing than the little Teletubby holes. and why you would need to worry about making an entrance to this campus doesn't seem like a weight you want your project to carry.
I would say, cause through this diagram, I think I'm just trying to study like different ways of arranging spaces, and I'm thinking more like to have more problems of my building instead of, but to solve them afterwards.
Yeah.
I just want to have like a special spaces instead of normal spaces.
As I say, I'm sympathetic to that project. I would like to see more payoff from that effort in terms of what those special things are. Making problems for yourself, I appreciate it. And it's mostly with the market and all of this, but this would be mostly a housing project. Is that, Maxie, would that be the case for your section?
Yeah, we ask everybody to have at least 30% of housing, but I think, Leo, if I'm correct here, you have a theater underneath, but what's the folding bar? What's the program in folding market?
This is a market, and this is the resident.
Yeah, the tower, the little.
Got it.
The black
towers of the residence.
Yeah, I think actually this diagram, I guess I didn't catch it on the first go around, but this diagram actually helps me a lot understanding the program, because that was going to be my question too, is sort of what was happening in those upper bars. To me, what's interesting, and I don't think it's all the way resolved, but what you're doing sort of with the resultant ground plane and sort of the space that you're making is interesting. I'm not exactly sure how that translates into sort of the residential elements of that. I think one of your other section kind of showed pretty pretty orthogonal floor plates kind of being stuck in the sort of tilted bars in there, which I guess is kind of what you have to do at the end of the day. But to me, what's really interesting is the underground theater, that kind of the resultant of the void space. And the fact that you could sort of take the precedent of the historical building that's already on site there and sort of abstract that to get to more open space, but still have some lineage. I'm not sure, sort of what that, ultimate, materiality would be on the finish of that. But if there was some, visual, whatever connection to the historical elements out there, would be interesting to see how, you kind of crumpled up the old historical building and then as a result create this new sort of outdoor space that didn't exist before, that people could then go to the market, go to the theater, or do all these things. I think becomes interesting as a concept, but then it kind of loses me as you get sort of up into the sort of residential tower portion of it. But the sort of ground floor and sort of below ground places and sort of the resultant changes in the ground plane, I think are really interesting to me.
Okay, Leo, I'm giving you a whole lot of information here to defend you from Andrew Sago's comments. First, I have a diagram of a hospital layout. This is the vet hospital. This is 19th century. I'm finding some 19th century hospital typologies. And the way that they were done is that they created this kind of figure ground form. So one is, I did 2 screenshots of the typology, and you see that history of the typology, and yours would be the number 4 onto that. And that, so you got the, this is what I was trying to find the English word of the pavilion type. The pavilion type is like separate by bars and always has the connecting, element. So the number 4, so you have quadrangular, Greek cross, circular, panopticon, or pavilion type. So, you have that kind of pavilion type form. And then I sent you the other list. And then what you did is that you broke down the pavilion form and started to kind of weave it. So that diagram maybe becomes, I mean, I think that the underground programming seems a little bit conflicting for me, in the sense that you will have so many columns. So I'm not sure how you put those theaters below, but you would imagine how, you know, having all that kind of figure ground or that U shape, how this is an amazing model. That model that you have of the underground as a carved model, you know, for your physical model is quite amazing. How the pavilions would be in and out of that, and how you challenge the ground with your project. I'm not sure those circular things that you have in the project, you know, for programming, and then the fact that the bars go up and down, it seems that then a lot of things happen in there. But definitely the way that you work with pavilion base, not the atrium base, but the pavilion base, and then the negative space is very clear in this model, and something that I think it's an amazing discovery. At the volume level, then I think then you should go really far out there. But you know, the project is amazing nevertheless, you know, but it kind of questions those things. Yeah, like Anna said, a pavilion high rise. So there you have your typology there now. Leo, you can defend it from there. And then you have the whole history there, going back to kind of Adriano's villa.
Thank you.
All right, so that might be a good moment to transition, if there are no final comments, to Lou. Okay, thank you, Leo.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Leo. Great job. Where's your cat?
Hello everyone. I'm Lo, and first of all, I want to introduce that my site is on the far right of the VA campus by 405, and my project is a complex of apartment buildings and memorial park and landscape. It can be seen as a community composed of a few clusters, as you can see here. Each cluster has its own height, public space, traffic flow, and evidence of its own site division. The typology of the building comes from the President Aldo Rossi's San Cataldo Cemetery, this one. And Rossi believes that architecture is actually a city. Any form of architecture or any attention or care for architectural development actually represents a very important development content of a city. So he took the simplest architecture form as the main body of the design, and then integrates the concept of the city. So my project starts from the deconstruction and reorganization of the President's landscape system. The simple form of buildings with reduced personality. The simple form of buildings with reduced personality increases repetitiveness, thereby showing the urbanity and extendability of the project. So to make it not a closed loop of buildings on the site, but an understanding and respond to the urban planning. At the same time, because the freeway, because the freeway occupies half of the ground, I bent up part of the buildings, and this move just created an excellent opportunity for me to make a memorial park at the center. As you can see in the section, this responds to the National Cemetery opposite the freeway. And this park will be overlap and evolution of the landscape. The height changes allows the user's vision to clearly cover the cemetery opposite the freeway. As you can see here is like the multiple layers of landscape, like overlapping, elevated in the building. And speaking of these fences surrounding the building, Chan-Cataldo symmetry method of evenly dividing the scope of the building was adopted in the overall planning of the building and landscape. From the top view, you can see that each of my clusters are assigned to the positions that belong to the entire grid system. Their boundary is also clearly established by these partition walls. And also, although the Memorial Park is separated from the buildings on the grounding height, but it still can see from the plan that it belonged to the whole building system. And these are the close shot, and you can see how the partition walls that separates the site of the clusters. And one unique thing that I add to the community is to have this this unrelated object, and I use these objects to connect and also to add differences of traffic flow and functions and circulations. And as you can see how these objects attach to the buildings. And basically, in my project, I have 3 elements, and the building as the architecture form, and the partition wall as a way to separate the sites into clusters. And also I have these objects as one way to have some relationship with its own site, like as a part of city.
I think we should let the jury speak. Thank you.
Can you point
yeah.
one? Can you point to each one of those 3 things that you just said? The 3 elements?
Okay, in like the purple thing, the boxes as the buildings, and the gridded orange walls as the second one, and these black and white objects and with curved shape.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, I finished the presentation though.
And what is in that program of that piece that's elevated that looks over the cemetery? What is the program?
I'm thinking of as a memorial park, like it can because it's half interior and it's not exactly exterior, and I just have one side is open to the cemetery, and 3 sides are all closed. And
it's a memorial place that absorbs the social functions of the cemetery, Andrew.
I see. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you go back to one of your sections? I was trying to figure out where the 405 freeway was in one of the cross sections you were.
Oh, here on the top is the 405, the freeway.
And where would that be in one of the cross sections you had? I couldn't tell which way it was oriented.
The crop section.
The section.
Which one?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah. Where is the 405 in that one?
It's been cut. It's been cut.
It's cut in parallel to the 405.
Okay.
lines.
Is there one that cuts, I guess, whatever perpendicular, so it's cutting through the freeway?
I don't have a section cut the freeway.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was orienting myself correctly.
Maybe you can, yeah, maybe you can see it here, like the freeway is behind the building.
Can you go to that Rossi drawing for a second?
Okay.
Yeah. It's just funny, you know, one of the amazing qualities of this drawing is you can't tell if it's both, in parts it's a plan, in parts it's a elevation, and in part it's a kind of site plan, other times it's a cut plan. And I know you just said it as kind of having to do with you ran into the freeway and so you folded it up, but yes. It also looks a little bit like you just took the drawing literally and thought, well, I'm just going to build this. And it's interesting because this, I'm sorry, you can go back to yours now. I just wanted to point that out about it. I think there's a kind of, and you know, there are several pieces, you know, there's those kind of long buildings, there's the ossuary, and then there's the I don't know what that is, a chimney or something. And it seems like you just, I mean, I don't know, it seems like just as an ensemble, this is both the project, in particular this drawing, is doing a little bit like maybe what Maxie you were describing at the beginning. Is it building urbanism? Is it, you know, and I think the idea that your this fabric rolls out, hits the 405 and raises up, and then exposes itself to the cemetery on the other side of the 405 and takes on some special program there is very interesting. I just wonder if it couldn't be, rather than this cube that in true SCI-Arc style overlaps the boundaries of your site, because heaven forbid there's never enough room. But instead, you know, if you had an entire wall there, you know, a kind of a vertical extension of the cemetery, and you could, you know, in that cube, it's just little boxes that then remains. I think it's all from cremation. Remains get put in there and then they get sealed off. You could have this giant wall there facing the, like, I think there's a kind of, it's a somberness, but it's also seems somehow appropriate of combining with your program this commemoration of the dead, which of course is not a minor thing when it comes to military service. Like, it seems like it could be doing less complicated work, and could be that there's a kind of more I don't know how to put, there's a simpler diagram that may be doing a lot of the things that you're trying to do. And it reads a little too much like a sampler, like I can see I get a taste of all of these different things. And I think the basic intuition of the project and the basic move is strong. And I think there could be more focus on that and less, and then I did this, and then I did this.
I see.
Kind of, that's.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
Yeah, I think I understand. Yeah.
I mean, I think Andrew's point is it's something that you've heard before, Lou, that this project has this kind of inchoate kind of state, right, in which things never quite crystallize into real volumes. They always begin to kind of float into this free layering and kind of funny sampling of the Rossi, but the Rossi elements, right, like facades and roofs and plants are taken almost separately and freely. I do agree that you do inquire into a lot of formal, I don't know, exuberance or almost like, I don't know, funny formal detailing of things encountered. And sometimes they produce funny layouts in which you have screens that don't delimit volumes. They're like, you know, it's kind of a bit of a labyrinth when you get into this project. and you know, and it has that kind of quality. It's hard to put your finger on really exactly how to describe the project because it has that funny syntax that sometimes has off.
Yeah. So is it you're saying that these compositions are still too much, and I should focus on one idea of the urban fabric thing?
Sure. I mean, I don't want to speak too much. I'm not sure if I'll say too much. I'll just say maybe we have to find a language to talk about that I think I recognize I don't have to talk about the way these planes and volumes and whatnot meet, or elements, right?
I'll add, just sort of thinking about the going back to the Rossi piece, you know, one of the things that I kind of see in there as it pertains to urbanism is the grid that organizes some of those disparate pieces, but then also the repetition of certain elements in there. And I think maybe a little bit of both, some sort of more organizing grid, and then a little more repetition and some of the less variation. I'm thinking in particular on this image, like the two, I guess, kind of pavilion pieces that are right there on the front of that image. You know, maybe those are more screen elements to match what's in the building, like a little bit more, you know, repetition in that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you, Lou. We have to move on.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
If you could
Sam?
stop the sharing.
Hi, Sam. Good morning.
Hi.
Jump in.
Hi, I'm Sin from Anna Studio. If I have to select a word to describe my project, interlock will be the word. My project starts with President Battery Maritime, which is located in Manhattan. I learned how program interlock with each other in this project. And looking through the elevation, I'm interested in the two different scale of program in one building. The front side of the building is the scale for human entering the building, and the back side is the scale for ship. Looking at the plan, I'm interested in how the scale changed in the building from human to ship. Here's the section.
Sorry, the scale changes from human to what?
To ship, like.
Ships. Oh, I see.
Yeah. And Johnson and I did a mailing model of the elevation. We took an elevation as parts and we assembled them to learn how those pieces interlock in three-dimensionally. My site is located in the G6, which is a parking lot under the Rocher Boulevard. My project is interesting in housing program for veteran and veteran dog. I know there are a lot of dogs also retire from the military every year, and we need space for them too. I also did some research of what kind of function dog park need. For example, they need different zone for different size of dog, double gate entries, chairs for human, and dog train stop, drinking and cleaning area. And relate back to the elevation full model as we did, we learned how things interlock. I was using some animal shape to create animal puzzle. Here are some individual animal pieces. And here's the photograph showing how I create the masking for my projects by playing with the animal pieces. By rethinking how those animal puzzles interlock, I did another male model. the table show the evolution of animal pieces from 2D to 3D. You can see the detail of how their leg interlock to the other animal head. And here is a photograph of the melon model and a diagram showing how they connect. For the facade, I designed to make it seriously to create a contrast to the playful animal puzzle. From the right page, you can see the facade detail of two animal connection and the training moment of the facade. This is a rendering of my trunk model pieces, and here's the trunk model on the other side and interior. And this is the 3D print version, maybe show in detail better, but the rendering model show more how we thought about how pieces interlock to each other. Jumping to the program, here is a program diagram showing how I thought about the program of the building as an X-ray image of an animal. By thinking each animal as an individual building, I design each individual part of building just like the program diagram. So there are some larger space, there are published, and everything else is filled in with housing. The belly of elephant become a concert hall. The heads of rhino head become an indoor playground for kids and dogs. The hump of camel become a gym. The body of crocodile become a lobby. The swimming pool inside the bull's horns. Common space inside of the pig nose. Party space inside the bird bag. This section show how they connect together, and you can see the staircase and the elevator. And here's the program. I have 52 floors, 600 units around, and 750 feet tall. And this the plan show the concert hall inside the elephant. This is the outdoor garden on top of the elephant and under rhino. Here's the playground inside of the rhino head. Outdoor cinema based on the rhino shape. And barbecue area between camel leg. And gym inside of camel. And smoking area between the hump of camel. A lobby inside crocodile mouth. Outdoor gym between bow leg. Swimming pool on top of both. Common space inside pig nose. Party space inside the bird bag. And this is the ground floor plan for my building. There's a dog park outside of the building, around my building. Yeah. And there's a rooster food. This is the ground floor plan and food plan castle. Here's 100 model.
Go back one. Go back one. Okay. Thank you.
This one show the connection between the other processes and other programs and the ground field and overflow. Yeah.
Can you go back to one that show where the piece was on the site? I got lost in the orientation of where you were.
This one?
Yes, okay. That's Wilshire to the north, and then the freeway to the east.
Yeah.
Actually, why do you orient it like that, at that angle to north and to?
The head is here. It's like You leaving the freeway?
So all the animals' rear end are facing the freeway?
No, animal facing here.
Which side is the head?
Here.
And which side is the butt?
Here.
Facing the freeway.
Yeah.
So that's for everyone coming down from the valley?
Yeah. It's like you can range drive over the virtual roof. Seems like you experience walking with the animal. Like you go from here to here.
I'm not sure what I have to say in terms of endorsing or not endorsing the project as a building, but I do really appreciate it. I mean, you sort of just did it, and it's there, and you know, I'm trying to imagine how much less you could have made it look like animals. I think not a lot less. I think that kind of, you know, really anonymous facade over everything helps a lot. And you know, oddly enough, I think it could almost work. I mean, boy, you're going to need a lot more core than that. You got like 2 elevators, you know, thing's going to have like 8 elevators, but that's okay. I think you could fill it up like that and it wouldn't hurt the project.
Yeah, just right through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That part's not going to work, but it's okay. How many floors?
52, wasn't it?
Yeah, 52.
Yeah, like 8 elevators, and they're going to be for different functions and service elevators. It's okay. It doesn't matter.
Just a small comment. Anna, in your introduction, you referred to the idea of the exquisite corpse, and I feel to me this is a kind of version of that, but I might say it's closer to a totem pole.
Yeah.
And you know, interesting. From what I'm not an expert in totem poles by any means, but from what I understand is that one of the possible functions is commemoration. And there seems to be what seems to me like quite a kind of serious message behind this idea of using of commemorating animals, and which in a kind of deeper way you might think of as kind of recognition of companion species, and the idea of the kind of supportive, important social relationships between human animals and non-human animals. And I think that's a part of your project which you could potentially kind of frame more explicitly, maybe. That you know, I thought that slide, I'm coming at this as a kind of like research perspective. I thought the slide that you showed where you had done that research on the relationship between veterans and the animals and the kinds of shared behaviors they have, I think that's really fascinating. And so it seems to me that the kind of stacking of your animals is more than like a formal party, but it actually could have a kind of really important significance, both in the public commemoration of companion species in war and in kind of care, palliative care. And but I thought I might think that might work itself out more specifically in some of the plans. And because I guess I look at them from the perspective of a companion species, and I feel like they're very human plans. Or maybe I'm not kind of seeing it so much, but that seems to me an interesting idea, is what kind of a space is suitable for humans and their companion species that's kind of different from just ordinary human space.
Can you say again the question?
I guess it was just a kind of reflection, I guess, saying that to me, I see in your work this idea of the companion species. That it's kind of, you're designing for humans and animals together. And I think that's a really strong discourse that you could kind of develop in the way you describe your project, possibly with reference to like the totem pole. But B, in terms of the internal organization of your 52 floors, the question for me is, how do they reveal the particular form of life which exists when humans and animals live together, as opposed to when you're designing space for just humans without animals?
Yeah, I think I should do that more, but I think I have created some area for example, the playground here. There's a different zone for different kind of dog, and here's a playground for kids also. But I think I should do more in the units too. Yeah.
Sin, I have appreciated so much this semester that you've taken your own kind of sense of humor quite seriously. And I like all the comments also in the chat. Hernan reminded us of the Clorindo Testa Naval Hospital in Buenos Aires that has the kind of bull's head. And the question in a way is, for you, is how much figuration, how much abstraction, at what point do you translate some of these moments into formal, but also, as John is suggesting, a kind of human and companion interaction? What would that be? How does the building change because of its inhabitants and some of the programming that you're introducing? So to be continued. Thank you for the very playful interjection into a pretty serious day. Next, we have Andrew. Andrew.
Thank you.
Hi. Okay. Hi, my name is Andrew, and my project for the VA campus focuses on rehabilitation and reintegration for war veterans. The main programs of interest for my project were farmers market and an indoor botanical garden. The farmers market will act as a bridging program for the veterans to reintegrate into their neighboring community. The botanical garden will be an alternative therapy space for rehabilitation where the veterans may heal themselves by tending the gardens. In the initial steps to develop my project, I started to search factory buildings. Their monumental form and their massive floor-to-ceiling spaces were the topic of my interest. I chose to look deeper into the IRT powerhouse in New York that was built by Stanford White in the early 1900s. The IRT powerhouse generates electricity through steam engines, and it's located next to the Hudson River and the train tracks to take in water as well as coal. This is the collectively made drawing by our studio lab, and we were asked to do a formal analysis of the plans and sections of our precedents. Each group or individual then made digital mock-up models in preparation for transitioning into physical modeling. I sort of looked into the long spanning hallways and the repetitive programmatic spaces of the factory. Figuring out the tectonics of how the pieces come together was an important step of this process. And this was the precedent model. These are the list of few of the plant specimens that reside in and around the building. In the 1940s and 50s, rehabilitative care of hospitalized war veterans significantly expanded acceptance of the practice. No longer limited to treating mental illness, horticultural therapy practice gained in credibility and was embraced for a much wider range of diagnosis and therapeutic options. Today, horticultural therapy is accepted as a beneficial and effective therapeutic modality, and it is widely used within a broad range of rehabilitative, vocational, and community settings. As a method of rehabilitation and reintegration for the veterans, I propose a project that allows veterans to access horticultural therapy, housing to create a closed veteran community within the project, and a marketplace to give the veterans an opportunity to interact with the community. These are a few step-by-step process of how a tomato is grown to demonstrate what the veterans would be doing in the garden. My site sits on the upper side of the campus adjacent to the neighboring community. The roof was important to me because of its monumentality and its ability to house gardens. The adjacent neighborhood allows close access of the public into the farmers market, which can instigate reintegration for the veterans. These are the three main entry points to the project. From the east side is the public access from the neighborhood. From the west is the private entrance for the veterans, and from the south is an entrance for trucks for delivery and storage. Looking back to my precedent of the factory typology, I integrated long expanding hallways in the interior of the building, which allowed me to separate private and public spaces and also introduce ramps in the interior of the project. I also integrated a repetitive programmatic nature of a factory program and utilized them as layouts for tables and rooms. The top floor houses a garden for horticultural therapy. The ground floor allows veterans and the public to interact, and the floor below that houses the veterans, and the lowest floor houses the marketplace. This is sort of the axon of the unit and the marketplace. The long spanning hallways allowed me to integrate ramps, which allows veterans with disabilities to easily maneuver through the building. And finally, these are some detailed drawings of some of the garden and the marketplace. And I'll finish off with some photos of the physical model that I made. Yep, that's it. And special thanks to Rodney, Brandon, and Nick from the shop for helping out this semester.
Hey, Andrew, you don't have the architectural drawings, I realize, on your Mural board. Can you just go maybe through those again? Yep. Now, this is sort of like a
I see. I'll go to the diagram for the access points. Yeah.
Next one. Next.
It's the ground floor plan.
Okay, so that's access, veterans private balcony. Where does the public go?
The public comes from the east, which is the bottom of this.
Yeah, but then what do they do once they come in? Are welcomed?
They can either go to the upper floor garden or the market, or go downstairs through the ramp to like a meeting place with the veterans, like an integration area.
And what's the upper floor?
The garden, roof garden.
And I thought they're coming here to buy produce.
Yeah, there's a marketplace in the basement, so they can also go to the public can access the garden in the marketplace, and that's basically it. And that's sort of the idea for integration. Like the public can sort of be part of this gardening process that the veterans are sort of carrying out in the building.
Just because I like the project a lot, it just seems like how you have like maybe some pieces in the wrong places or something. I'm not sure what I would imagine that, especially given that this is LA, that a lot of this gardening would just happen. It doesn't have to be in a greenhouse, that the rest of your site that you're leaving untouched would just get plotted out as a garden.
Yeah, I sort of wanted to keep the surrounding muted and bring everything into this monument, like keep it as like a monument and sort of bring everything inside, like a factory.
I understand you wanted to do that, but I disagree with it. I think if you go back to the plan, the site plan, yeah, and if you just imagine this kind of, you know, I think it would be very nice, you know, instead of just these kinds of indifferent walkways, you know, there could just be you know, why wouldn't they want, you know, to go outside and have it like a community garden, you know, whatever it is, it's a garden. The other thing is, I guess from your types, you know, there, you know, the market halls, it seems odd to put that in the lowest level. Yeah. It's not going to have windows. What are the private quarters?
Oh, it's sort of like another place for rehabilitation, sort of like a more private space for like veterans that need more privacy. Because there's a lot of public areas in the building, I sort of thought that there should be some private spaces.
Because it has a really nice ground relationship, and I think we see that in one of the other drawings, some of the exterior drawings. That go back, yeah, and go back one. And towards the beginning of the presentation. Rewind. Yeah, there. Oh, yeah. Very interesting. I just think it's really nice. I just think somehow the ambitions of the project, you know, which is I'll buy, and it's interesting. The form and landscape control of it are really good, and then I just feel like, I don't know, somehow the pieces are kind of, and even the way that you enter into it is good. But then after that, I feel, I don't know, somehow the pieces are not in the right place. And that there's just some kind of programming to massing diagrams that I just think are needed. I mean, because I'm saying this in terms of, you know, it's a critique, so I got to say something critical. But it's a nice project. I'm just talking. I'm pointing out in the context of a good project, what I see is, you know, it's just that the problems sort of bother me more because I think they're absolutely sort of solvable. And yeah, some of the final model, which I really appreciate the ambition of it in this context of our troubled times, but it doesn't give the same special quality. If I look at the section of it, the slide before this, I think, wherever you show the section. Yeah, I want, you know, I want something more.
Yeah, I agree with your comments as well too. I mean, I like the concept and so the idea of the gardening and the healing sort of all being rolled together. It makes a lot of sense. I was actually kind of waiting to see, you know, which project would kind of start to address that, given the history of, you know, people coming out to California to heal in the sunshine and do all these different things. And so you have it there, but then you put it all within the building. So it seems like there should be some opportunities for that to bleed outside and, you know, have some outdoor gardening space and have some outdoor healing spaces and all these sorts of things coming together. And I think the idea of the sort of industrial building is strong. I guess the only piece that I would kind of look for is, you know, maybe establishing some type of sort of hierarchy in the sides. You know, is the entrance that's facing the neighborhood, the residential neighborhood, differentiated in some way from the entrance that's, you know, for the veterans that are going to be living there, and thinking about that, you know, the whether that's, you know, just breaking that institutional sort of, you know, form in certain places, or whatever it may be, but just kind of establishing a little bit of hierarchy, or maybe just giving us some little special moments where something will poke in or poke out to kind of let us know what's going on. I think the the form of the industrial building is so clear. You can chop it in certain areas, you can break it in certain places without losing the monumental quality of it. It doesn't have to be wholly sort of contiguous, one material, one color all the way around to still be very monumental. I think especially when you kind of start to weave, ideas about landscape and grading and access, those can be areas that you can find those sort of moments to do something different where, hey, this is where the entry is, so I'm going to cut something through here and open it up a little bit, or whatever the case may be, and it still would 100% be a monument kind of in the landscape.
I totally agree with Lance, because I think that, oh, sorry. What I can, this, stay in this, Andrew, in this cut, because, the barn building, I mean, I'm not an expert on barn buildings, I just have seen a few of them, but they mostly, I think they stay at grade, no? I mean, they stay, oops, that's a straight line. No, it's right. I mean, the relationship to the ground, they land on the ground, it's a ready-made, it's a prefab that comes and it's dropped. The frames are set and so on. So the fact that you are doing this, you're cutting it from the ground. I mean, that's a big move. And I think that, to Lance's comment, I think it would have been, I think somebody, Alec, maybe you can mute.
Alec, can you mute, please? Anna, can you mute him?
So I think this line coming in, all the questions from Andrew to Lance of, you maintain the concept of the barn, but in section it will be quite different. Maybe the landscape, or the tomato landscape, will come in, and so then you break down something that is a kind of pre-made industrial machine into an architectural device. And so maybe you don't deal with the landscape, but instead of using the garden, like Andrew Sago was saying, maybe the garden comes in, because you have the sectional properties. And then it's very strange when you have this flat, like this flatness of that roof without taking advantage. So I think the section of this, we see a lot of plans. I think the section is an important. I'm going to clean up my stuff here.
So thank you for these comments. And Andrew, thank you for all this amazing effort in thinking through physical models. And I realize now, also hearing your comments about kind of bringing this building closer to the landscape, that it's a bit of a Siberian barn in the middle of Los Angeles. So, but these are amazing kind of ways to begin to open this up and produce that relationship that everybody's describing, Andrew. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Kevin, are you ready?
Yeah, I am ready.
Okay.
Hi, so my site is a large parking lot located at the bottom half of the VA campus, right over here. And my building is a performing arts center in the VA campus, using the power of rehabilitation through art therapy to heal the mind and body, allowing veterans to have the opportunity to interact and learn from world-class instructors of the theater, music, and arts. So starting this project, we were asked how an urban condition could be congested to create more diverse notions of urban composition. Through the readings of Rowe and Coyler's Collage City and the drawings of Louis Kahn and Alvaro Aalto, it is understood that typological structures could be puzzled through techniques of spatial and formal composition, which can create a densified reconfiguration of architectural objects that make architecture and its surrounding landscape. So examining the composition of the VA campus, there is an important relationship between the building typologies and the public spaces that it surrounds. These typologies, such as the wing building, produces a planimetric relationship that helps to frame the elements of the landscape, creating multiple pockets of spaces in between the parallel wings of the building forming parks, lawns, gardens, and other various public spaces. In my project, the interfaces of these round pill-like objects and the contorted wing typology brings about the concept of urban packing and density. Specifically, how all these objects and the extensive typology of the wing and spine can be bound and constrained to exist within a more reduced space. If the initial wing building contains a number of localized spaces in between the perpendicular set of its wings, this idea of contorting and bending the initial planimetric diagram of the typology produces a more contained and intricate set of open spaces in between one another. This resulting position/organization of the object can also be understood as a construct that represents the facts of its urban environment in a socially recognizable way, giving its users and veterans a sense of place and relationship with the building and the campus. Contained and existing in between these are large pill-like objects right here that can be read as a second order. Much like how packing peanuts are used, these large pills protect and prevent the further contortion of the typology itself, creating a conceptual equilibrium keeping the building in shape. With this organization, each object took on a specific program. The newly contorted typology became a semi-public space where offices, the main lobby, shops, and classrooms would be located right here. And situated on top of it would be the massive solid pill that acts as a semi-private space where more large extensive programs such as a theater will be located. The circulation idea of a typical wing building is from a single or double loaded corridor always located within the spine of the building, which is then distributed out onto its finger-like wings. In my project, much like the MIT Baker House by Alvar Aalto, this circulation would turn into a different kind of staircase corridor, which cascades up and down through the contortions of the wing and folded spine of my project, acting as a condition that is reaching out and connecting every floor of the building and its programs. It is through the collapsing of the raw planimetric typology that produces a denser congested urban composition to what once was a more spread out, sparse typical VA campus typology of the wing and spine. This project utilizes the idea of urban packing to redefine the link between typology and landscape that surrounds it, keeping an individual presence while offering community to the urban texture. And that is the end of my presentation.
Want to go to the mural board, Kevin?
Yeah.
So,
I'm going to make one suggestion or observation that I realize is contrary to something fairly fundamental about your project, Kevin. So don't just listen to it. It seems like the foam model in particular is quite interesting, and part of what it does is it has a kind of constraint built outside of it and inside of it, which is the box and then these little round pieces. And then both of those act on the green. And then you get rid of the box outside, which is good. I think you should also have gotten rid of the round pieces. In other words, the strange kind of physics of what the effect is on this, I think would have left a more dramatic set of relationships between the various pieces of the building than literally leaving, let's say, the formwork of it. Now, I know that's not where your project went, and I'm probably discussing decisions that were made, long before midterm, so you don't have to, but just as a way of thinking. You see what I mean, right? Like, you squeeze it like this and you remove it, and you can see how it was held. And I think you could have done the same with the inside, and you could have had these very interesting spaces to put in there. And my only other, I'm not going to talk too much. I'm looking at that little rendering of a piece of your building, the one that you showed after the Alto dorm, and I didn't quite get the connection. It's on the kind of bottom row of images there in your Mural board. Yeah, that one. The little pink balconies are not part of that stair circulation. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're not.
They're not, right? Okay. It's the piece in front of it that would function like that.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to kind of go in the other direction a little bit, which is I like the little, whatever you call them, pods that kind of were inserted in the middle there. Especially given the program, I think sort of defining it as a performing arts center, performing arts space in the sort of context of these wing buildings, doesn't really lend itself to that, to me, as sort of from a formal approach. But by inserting the pods in there, gives you that ability to have that larger performing arts space. And I think, to me, the sections are sort of the things I like the most, but not just inserting the pods, but sort of understanding how that insertion could, manipulate the existing conditions of bending those wings around it, is interesting to me. I think I'm not entirely sure what the pink kind of balconies are doing, or pink sort of elements are doing in there. That's kind of the only piece where it kind of trails off a little bit for me. But just the concept of kind of dropping these pods into these sort of very orthogonal, very sort of traditional wing buildings, and then it's almost like it ripples through that existing form, and just you kind of get what you get after that. Like, wherever you throw the rock in the pond, it just does what it does. So I like that part of it. I think, how it exactly translates to where everything is bent is, I think, can certainly be fleshed out a little bit more, but sort of as it relates to the sort of choice and program, I think I like how that headed.
I think I find Kevin, the project and the process of it refreshing, in the sense of I think there is something interesting about the project. It kind of goes against the grain of the solemnity with the context and the program demands. So there is something really about almost much more like choreographic, let's say, than compositional. So it has this kind of a notion of movement, and the idea that there will be incredibly rich variation in terms of the relation between inside and outside and what happened in the interiors, but also this notion of like pebbles on a beach, or like a series of pillows. So there is something, to me, really interesting about the manipulation of even though it's a fairly big, massive project. I think by doing it and breaking it to pieces, I think you make it more like a collection of in which the relation with the human scale seems to be very viable. I also find interesting the way that the windows and the balconies. I'm with Lance and Andrew. I'm not sure yet how they work exactly, but in terms of what it does about cutting into the pieces and give it like a different character, almost like a quasi-cartoonish character of a window also, because I think in terms of the proportion and size, they're probably quite big, but the effect they produce is almost that they look like they're like little house windows. or something like that. So there is something, I think the thing I find more interesting about your project is it's incredibly simple in terms of the manipulation of a scale. Like it's almost impossible to comprehend what is the size of it. And to me, that's kind of a virtue in a project of this magnitude, of this size, of this, that could be very monumental if it's not articulated in a way. So to me, that's the most interesting part of the project. In a strange way, I find your site plans some of the most interesting parts of the project. Because also there is a strange relation between the elevations and the site plans that they almost, you can see that they're related to it, but they speak about two different things. So in plan, there is a kind of a coherency of the project, but then in elevation, it starts to become much more fragmented. So it's in that tension to me with the power of the project is. I'm not sure about the grid pieces that keep coming across. I don't know, that they seem to belong to a different logic. So I'm not so sure about that part. I wonder, and I think in the chunk that I think Andrew was mentioned, to me that overlap of the grid that it seems like it doesn't quite fit, but that maybe is why it's there. But mostly what I find is super interesting is the mixed direction of the sense of scale that the project proposed. I find that that's super powerful.
Well, Kevin, I think you've done a great job. Just I like the kind of Cheetos holding the bars and the bars holding the Cheetos. We always find it quite funny, not being able how to really talk about them, whether they were in compression, what was holding one another. I find an odd juxtaposition between the two, but there is something that attracts me to it, and I'm glad you wrestled with those windows, and they kind of hint to the Mirage's Vigo campus in the sense of the wing building and the window kind of bullioning the building. I find that quite formally and tectonically quite interesting. But yeah, good job. We need to move on right now. Cole, you're gonna be next. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm gonna paste some. Before you start the timer, I'm gonna paste these links in the chat just in case there's a bandwidth issue. But I'm gonna share my screen right now. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see this. Hi, my name's Cole Mizuno. Yeah, let's do it. In order to rethink what the highest and best use of what the VA campus could be, I want to propound two questions, one of aesthetics and the other of politics. Urgency and speed at which the campus of the Veterans Affairs responds to the persistent and pervasive lack of access, inclusion, and equity for the constituents of the campus will be determined by a back and forth argument between these two extremes. The heterogeneous mixture that I'm proposing is a three-part relationship between object, fabric, and landscape that seeks new possibilities between the tension of form and space through playfully allocated organization of mass and volume. If wholes are worth more than the sum of their parts, then the emergence of qualities relies upon the matching and mismatching of different orders. In order to prevent the reduction of the campus to a unity, the design of the campus calls for the accumulation of conflicting urban orders to transform the continuous urban fabric of the VA campus. So one solution that might be able to address the residential needs of the veterans might be prefabricated industrially produced housing components, which could be a rapidly produced intervention to the site. The American grain elevators that shaped the development of 20th century modern architecture was the response to an approach to building materials such as reinforced concrete. Today, they are only memories of the vacant post-industrial landscape with which they occupy, but the urgency at which these industrial building typologies could be deployed might be able to inspire us in different ways. The proposal I'm presenting possesses respective qualities of its own, but prefabrication suggests that there could be many. In an effort to make cities more affordable, one argument might lobby to reduce the legal barriers for building. If this were the case, how can we avoid the careless haste that are a result of developers who turn profit without ever considering the aesthetic consequences of a building, let alone its potential as a living space. This project proposes the joint venture between government land managed by the Veterans Administration, housing nonprofits, and prefabricating contractors to increase the supply of affordable housing for different income groups. Material is usually assumed secondary to form and geometry, which is assumed as primary. The removal of graffiti from the generic facades of Los Angeles leave a record of city spaces through ink and paint, leaving an additive layer in its place. These images were then trained on a neural network algorithm where the machine began to see qualities in the images of graffiti swipes, re-seeing the context in a different way. The playful congestion of different formal types allows objects to be read more connected as opposed to singular by bringing together different scales and typologies of the city. Among the many adjacencies possible, each layer follows a different order. Syntax of ingredients includes the point order, the pods, the vector order, which is the bars, and the topological order, which is the mound. Essentially, that's just landscape. Things huddle, where multiple objects look distinct as one. Features begin to repeat, but are never quite the same. Cluster maintains certain symmetries while shifting out of alignment and breaking others. The congestion of types depends on the quality of organization over the plural versus the individual. In order to support veteran health, wellness, healing, and recovery, each level of the building caters to the holistic needs of the campus population. The ground floor, which includes laundromat, supermarket, co-working space. The first floor, which is reserved for housing cooperatives. And in the pods above, a range of spiritually focused programs are included, such as physical therapy, guided meditation, yoga, and tennis, to name a few. So as it stands today, the VA campus suffers from a lack of capacity and resources at hand. The growing housing affordability crisis is too urgent to wait for the passing of bills and measures. An alternative residential logic requires the consideration of the speed and implementation of construction in order to increase the supply of affordable housing, and an agile response will demand prefabrication. A more congested urban idea enables the emergence of new organizations and new architectural effects to occur. The playful overlay of non-correlated urban orders. And thank you. I'm going to share my Mural board now. And then if you need me to zoom in on anything, I will.
Yeah, can you zoom in on I think that's your sort of concept models, those 4 down at the bottom, and maybe talk a little bit more about those?
Absolutely. Do you mean these ones?
Yes.
Right. So among the many kind of clusters and the way how objects kind of huddle towards each other, this was just looking at an assembly of these 3 orders. And along with the idea of prefabrication, I think one position is to suggest that I presented earnestly like the one building proposal, but if this were to be something to be deployed in other scenarios or as an intervention, this also could be like an iteration on its own. Yeah. This cluster is also here.
Yeah, I think number one, I think, the thesis and program that you kind of presented here, I think is really clear and kind of well thought out about all the different facets that go into a site like the VA campus, from the housing to the supportive services to everything else, and the idea of using prefab to kind of rapidly deliver that and kind of in a scalable fashion, I think is very timely. That's certainly something that a lot of people are addressing right now today, in different forms and fashions. I think what's interesting is sort of the way you're mixing sort of so-called different prefab elements. So the sort of ground floor elements would be one typology. The upper sort of whatever community spaces would be a different typology. You know, most prefab projects and designs you see are kind of all the same sort of kit of parts that gets used all over the place. But to kind of mix different typologies in there is interesting. I think the challenge that it presents, though, is having some sort of armature or infrastructure that kind of connect them all together, and be the spine, for lack of a better word, that kind of holds it all together. And to your point about, you know, these modules being able to be used maybe in different configurations. Yeah, maybe someplace else on the campus, it's just a community center and it's just those couple of prefab elements, and there's no housing program piece, or vice versa. Maybe there's a version of this that's all housing and no social services in there. So to me, the piece that, you know, I'd like to see just sort of more thought on is some sort of armature or infrastructure that could be, you know, used on this site, but potentially other places that all these different prefab elements could plug into, to really sort of provide that backbone for everything else that's going on. But overall, I like the idea a lot.
It seems a little bit that, you know, to your point, Lance, about a kind of unifying frame. I don't know that this would be successful, but I think Cole is proposing something a little bit different in terms of these multiple capsules. There's sort of at least two major systems that do, you know, that interact in different ways, but ideally the kind of constellation of capsules gives you most of your basic services, it appears, and then you get up into the orbs differently. And I don't know. I mean, I wonder if, in terms of a kind of, you know, a flexible model of framework, something more incremental like these capsules is, you know, potentially kind of an innovation. But I just, for what it's worth, you know, I think it's an interesting proposal on a few levels, but I want to try to get to me, there's an interesting play between two architectural precedents. I see there's a lot of the New Babylon here, and Constant's interest in how, you know, how a kind of almost self-enclosed, or a kind of endless but self-enclosed community could kind of take shape. Formally, I think it seems pretty clear you're trying to work out some of the questions that Young and Ayada were interested in a few years ago in terms of I think it's their Guggenheim proposal, or I don't know, I might be off on my museums there. But in any case, I like the idea of both this kind of 60s utopian precedent coming to terms with a much more contemporary set of questions about how you generate different strategies of envelope. But to the degree that that's the case, I think actually that I actually think this is a hybrid project in terms of its realization. The capsules seem really obviously well geared towards prefab, but I actually think your upper orbs would make more sense as kind of in place 3D, you know, like 3D concrete printing or so, like one, you know, full scale printing or something, and could happen incrementally, or, you know, there could be a kind of a way this sort of accretes over time.
Yeah.
Cool.
Go ahead.
No, a couple of things. First off, very, very well put together project, and compelling in many ways. Your presentation was also very interesting. I kept thinking like you were talking about a different project though, and I'm not sure why. You're talking about a certain kind of the typologies, the prefabrication, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know. Anyway, it's not a criticism. Maybe I just was having a hard time connecting the two, because it seems to be of a very kind of homogeneous atmosphere. And the three things you mentioned, which you say you see in the model, what's the third thing?
Oh, so the third thing would be this landscape component here, which is also made discrete as, I mean, I would imagine as a prefabricated assembly piece as well.
So that's the landscape.
Yes.
Okay, so the landscape is just its own thing. And then there's, of course, the ground itself, which exists, and then the other three pieces. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. The bar housing is interesting. It's not clear why some of them have windows and others have a corridor instead, or on the outside instead of them all being the one type. But the upper pieces, it's just an odd, and I thought the same thing about Michael Young's project. It's oddly yurt-like. I don't know. I'm looking, are those your photographs, by the way, of the graffiti?
Some of them I took when I would go out skateboarding, and others, a lot of them are found from Jason Revok. He's a graffiti artist. So some of these are both sourced and some of these are found.
I see, I see. They're fantastic. I don't think they improve by the digital manipulation. They just become kind of blurry, you know? I mean, they're actually extremely strong. I'm looking at the one you have large. I'm looking at the little pink one in the lower left corner. Even the way the shadows work on the lower right corner. They're kind of great. And they have a sort of odd, anyways, you obviously you feature them. There's a kind of, I don't know, there's a kind of edge to those, literal kind of edges to those things that gets lost in your project. And because it seems like there's a kind of blurred atmosphere and you're not discussing it that way. I guess that was the difference between your very articulate presentation and your very articulate project.
I know this is the final comment, and I saw that. So, Cole, I put a link there to Bernd and Hella Becker. Maybe not the right photograph, but you can Google it more if you like. I agree with all the comments. I wish that the volumes or the herbs, I think Joe was saying, had a bit more of the industrial residue on them. You know what I mean? Like, I say that maybe they have become something else, you know, almost that they belong to a different primitive. They don't belong to that early industrial that you're talking about. The kind of machine of living that Le Corbusier so much adore. But I think that if you look at it, not so much from Le Corbusier point of view of technology, but you look at it from Burns and Hella Becker's view of them as a species, in the sense, you know, how they did their photographs, or they, you know, making all of these kind of found objects in the kind of in the countryside or in the edges of cities, as if they were very similar to each other, when actually they were, you know, very different in scale. But, you know, these water tanks, this, you know, I don't know, silos. And so I wish that your project had a bit of that. I don't mean formally, so you can recognize the signifier of an industrial machine, but mostly so you could start to see an articulation between ready-made and your geometry and those, you know, the things that Andrew Sago was talking about in regard to the atmosphere, the painterly effects of your photograph, and so on. But I think, you know, I think conceptually is great. Your drawing, your presentation, all of it. I just think that you needed to control a bit more the you know, the formal operations of those tanks. Tanks, I meant, of the forms of the primitives.
Cole, thank you. And I maybe just a comment in a way, because the studio, which is the last in the core and the kind of beginning of vertical and thesis is next, we always called it the position studio, which is to say that the reason for all the diversity of the work today has to do with the students' own kind of search for self, let's say, search of articulation and thinking through where they want to maneuver their own kind of aesthetic ambitions. And there's so much that you showed today, Cole. And one thing that hopefully you can begin to do is untangle some of the love for some of the kind of other projects that you're looking at quite clearly, and really find your own voice. You know, I'm often I was reminded just now actually by David that you know, quoting Lacan, that love is also a form of pathology. So there's something about your project that is a bit in love with other buildings, and that is quite a bit pathological. So something I think will unlock itself in the next few semesters, because clearly you have such amazing ambitions here. Next, I'd like to ask Zane to present.
Thank you so much. Hello, I'm Zane. Give me 1 second while I set up my OBS. Okay. Does everybody see me on a green background?
Yes.
Okay. My site is, wait.
No.
Zane, we hear you typing, but you are frozen. So
even hear the typing.
Maybe come in and out.
I was typing, and I apologize for that, but I think we lost Zane. Do you want?
Nupur, if you're ready, would you like to go next? And then we'll come back to Zane.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nupur.
Hello, sorry. Okay, my internet goes out at 12:30 every single day for 1 minute. I totally just forgot. So I'm back. Okay. Everybody back seeing stuff? Okay, so
yes, we're good. We're good.
Yeah, the West LA VA campus has over 10 currently unused bus stops that are dispersed throughout the site. They were built gradually over time and thus have a variety of styles. Notable categories include the regular, the mini Philip Johnson Glass House, the domestic contractor chic, and the Venturi Scott Brown & Associates Hospital Modern. I biked the campus a few months ago, photographing all the bus stops, and here they are, cropped and laid out together. The only one I found actually in use is at the far right, which is on my site, located directly on the Wilshire overpass. Because of the large addition of program and housing being added to the campus within the studio, I'm proposing a new shuttle service, a central station, as well as a network of mobility and ADA-focused traversable services, which take the form of bus stops throughout the campus. Because of COVID, I planned out the bus stops digitally with everyone I collaborated with, and then I gave our TA Julie this map of the campus for how to place them. The interventions are designed with wide and mildly graded slopes, accessible not only for those in wheelchair, but also for these Moto EV electro transit buddy vehicles, which will help the areas of the new site which are inaccessible by car currently, which are notated by all the dashed lines. Mateus's project, which is basically just a giant cemetery and a hole in the ground, was one of the first bus stops. So I've been working through all of these through what I call composite models. These use a video game I've been developing originally for my precedent, which allows the user to place and rotate pieces of the existing site or drag in architectural pieces to modify the landscape of the ground to proportions set by my precedent, the James Fairley Post Office. While preserving, basically I just want to preserve what makes it special and unique from the more dense developments 2 minutes away. Because the game is programmed with a bias towards mobility, it also works as a sort of pedagogical tool with the entire campus being able to use it to learn how to remedy mobility issues that might arise from misalignments in the site gradation, which is already a problem even in the existing campus because of the steep topography. I'm proposing radical regrading to the entire VA campus while still preserving the hill-like park feeling that the campus currently represents both in the city, both historically and currently. So this is the next project. Basically, they gave me the entire peg to work with, which is the spot between the two puzzle pieces. And I was able to completely regrade this and sort it out. So there's actually no stairs. I removed like a bunch of stuff. And then here, I'll show how that works. So this is Madeline's project. This was developed the same way. And this kind of like me placing things. And then the last one is Kate's project, in which I actually lowered the entire thing and flattened it out and added another small ramp. So this is similar to how it works on my site. So this is the Wilshire overpass and the bus stop I was talking about. And what I did is I basically I moved the entire overpass 100 feet to the right, and then I put in a giant bridge and then put a ramp here, because otherwise you would have had to walk around the entire like Wilshire overpass to get to the from the bus stop to the actual campus, which is kind of something I don't think should be expected of someone with mobility issues. So here's Kate's, and you can see I've noted the weep holes as well as the existing site grade. And for the bus stop's design itself, I've been kind of taking 3D prints because these models have to be developed at such a small scale that putting them into a real scale, I've just kind of stacked foam core to represent this. And here are the 3 models I've 3D printed. Now getting to the station. These I've also worked through composite models in the same kind of way. The program of the building is a bus terminal, a lunch counter, and a post office. This station is essentially one big spiraling ramp, and you can see it here a bit. I'm going to place pieces. This is kind of the same thing as the composite. And here's a program diagram and some models. And then these kind of lines from the model get translated into kind of a solid material. But in the plans, this is kind of a interior topography plan, I guess, because both the ground and second floor have slightly graded floors, which make the bridging possible from the site. So this is the ground floor. So there's an entrance to the metro here, and the second floor. And you can see how the roof fits on. The roof is prefabricated, only customized in color and form. Still though, it would be extremely practical for a government project's budget. Similarly to how I represented the bus stops through this type of photographic scroll, I've also been seeing the building as the same way, where I've been section cutting it like in a circle. So here you can see like this is that bridge on the exterior. This is the lunch counter. And then here's the spot where Wilshire turns back into Wilshire because it's a circular drawing. So yeah, that's the project.
Zane, thanks. And are you going to come back to our regular Zoom view with your face? Okay, that's awesome.
Unharmed.
It's always a miracle.
Great. Just a dumb question. How many? I know you showed three of the smaller. These are, each one is like a bus stop and a chance for regrading it for certain accessibility parameters.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's an idea about, because we're talking about kind of like taking all these puzzle pieces and rearranging them in the site. So a possible way to actually get them to line up, because the topography won't line up, is to kind of put a bus stop there, and then the whole thing.
You'll do the glue that'll tie the, or whatever you want to call it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you showed 3, but I think in your site plan there's more than 3.
Right. I've just produced a few examples for how they would be done.
20 or a bunch.
Yeah.
Of them. And then the one that's on your site is the one that then you turn into the bus stop, and that's the one that you showed in more depth.
Yep.
I have no further questions. I mean, look, it's in the context of this presentation, and maybe in my own knowledge, I can't judge the. I'm not quite sure where the game comes in, but it seems clear that there's a. should I put this? The project is one with the system for implementing it. In other words, you know, everybody decides to change their project, no problem. You're going to get 20 new bus stop solutions coming out of it, right? So it's not like, and maybe even the final one, which is the building, as much as the plan is quite compositionally sophisticated, maybe, you know, with the maybe not super compelling as a form with the barrel vault, but so maybe, and it's not a criticism of it, but maybe I like it working as this kind of stochastic multi-possibility system, rather than, ooh, that's it, it's perfect, don't change another thing about it. And maybe for, you know, for bus stops, like I wonder if it could have just gone further with the bus stops and didn't need the building in it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think I had to produce a building though. That's part of the curriculum. So, but yeah, no, that was totally something I was considering. Yeah.
Well, okay, then it reads. I can read your between me and you. Don't tell Anna.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said you kind of had to produce a building, because that's kind of my comment, I think. I think the process of working, the process of making that you followed is really interesting, from sort of the literal sort of gameplay to, you know, the stitching of images together of the bus stops and all those things, and how it, you know, each sort of bus stop element was very informed by the project and the context around it. But then when you come back around to the station itself, your building, you didn't follow your own process all the way through there. I think it's like sometimes I kind of feel like if you just sort of continue to play the game, or you just continue to let the context drive what it is, it may not have been a building, but it would have been sort of completely tied into everything else that you created, if that makes sense. And so I get the idea, obviously, to, you know, have a building with a program and all those sorts of things, but given the sort of proposed program of a bus shelter, what that really means as far as, you know, actual programmatic spaces and volumes, it could kind of be anything. I mean, a big roof could be a bus shelter. Who knows? I mean, you could kind of do what you want with it. So I would maybe just encourage you to kind of trust your own sort of way of making a little bit further, and just take it all the way through, and don't feel like you have to put a roof on it at the end and just say, well, this is what it is. This is what the sort of, for lack of a better word, I'm saying, this is what the algorithm shows me what I should do, then just do that. And I think it'll be a little bit more seamless with sort of the rest of your process.
I mean, I would argue that, like, for instance, the building, I mean, it's basically just huge ground planes. Even the walls are very, like, it seems to not matter as much as the kind of topography of the building, like the interior spaces. So that's, and I kind of didn't want to like impose some sort of like new form to it. So that's why I kind of kept it simple with this, just like plop a roof. And that's kind of the same logic as the bus stops, where it's like, you have a shelter and you put a roof there, and that's kind of what creates the event, I guess.
But I think that, I mean, I think there's a sort of architecture urbanism rift to your project. And let me say off the bat, I think it's a fantastic project, and kind of brilliantly clever, you know, brilliantly clever at a whole variety of stages. But I think, you know, what I sense in both Lance and Andrew's comments, and I would echo them, is that somehow the savvy with which you read, for example, the actual bus stops in terms of their typologies, and I appreciated all the kind of South Parkitecture readings of more august architectural precedents as realized as, you know, LA bus stops. And to a certain degree, I think I'm missing a little bit of that in this building. And I think what's happened is that there's actually a very sophisticated but relatively hard to communicate adjustment you've made to the actual road system of that area, and I feel like that both, you know, it might have been driven by or maybe, I don't know where representationally that was in the film that you showed kind of 2/3 of the way through, but that was a brilliant kind of play with the, you know, what I read as holography and the screen imagery projection and your hand in the mix. What I want to see in this proposal somehow it seems like your larger bus shelter is sort of the residue, or, you know, what could happen in the midst of all this play rather than a kind of, you know, what could happen without getting in the way of all this play almost rather than a result of it. Maybe that's a little unfair. I'm positive that a lot of the moves for you are absolutely integral to that system, but bringing it to a kind of public audience where I think it seems almost like things have been melded seamlessly to a point where the kind of the legible disjunctures that you found in the bus stops are no longer kind of publicly accessible to us. But I mean, let me start as you did with this drawing, Wilshire to Wilshire, let me end where I started. This is an awesome project. It's great.
Thank you.
A question that I would have in addition to the comment, is just going back, so you got plenty of comments in regard to the project, but I wanted to go back to the game portion of it. So the question is that, I'm going to put in the chat, and you know probably already many of everybody else in the chat, but it's Eruche, every building on Sunset Street. You know, like you would do every bus stop on Wilshire Boulevard. I mean, I guess that there's a connection to that. Like, so you know, so Eruche, of course, an artist, that's an amazing book or pamphlet, however you want to call it. And the question would be, what you do with that? If you were an architect, like what you do with every building on Sunset Street? What do you do with every bus stop on Wilshire Boulevard? You know, so maybe what you do is a game. You know, you don't do a building, you know, you do, you know, that would be a way of working with it. Jonathan Gold did this every restaurant on Pico Boulevard. So you can have, you have so many variations of that. I wouldn't try that at every restaurant on Pico Boulevard, but I think that every bus stop on Wilshire, I mean, that's a thesis saying, by the way. I mean, soon you're getting into thesis, but that's a, you know, I think that all of these, like Anna said, that you guys are shifting towards independent research. I think that you have to keep on developing this, and then find a way in which you can bring them together. You know, the game with the kind of the research or site research, the discovery of these things, and also every one of those bus stops is horrific. You know, so meaning that as a kind of critique. How can the city probably invest so much money on bus stops that sometimes are the housing of homeless? You know, so I think that you have to, you know, I think it has a lot of meaning. It's the same thing when Jonathan Gold did every restaurant on Pico. Nobody would like do that. He said, this is what I'm going to do as part of my research. Places that nobody goes as restaurant critics, I'm going to do it. So, you know, the bus stops, I think, has that. So I think that, again, I'm not going to talk in particular about the project details, but about the meta topic of your thesis, your idea, your project. I think that you have to, you have to work. Your answer to the Eruche architectural version will be a game, but how do you make that game? I think that's still a question mark.
Yep.
Well, those are beautiful comments and great way to end and to say thanks to Zane, because I think you're absolutely right, Florencia, that like bringing attention to some of these very mundane things, but through the kind of surrealism of a kind of designed method seems to be already a thesis. So I'm glad that some of the students already are kind of finding themselves and getting ready for that next project in their lives. Zane, thank you.
Nupur, are you ready to jump in?
I'm ready.
Okay. Right, take it away.
Can you share see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. Myself Nupur Shah, and I have C7 as my site puzzle piece. Building an object should act both as space occupier and space definer, keeping an individual presence while offering continuity in the urban texture. My project started with looking at the courtyard with mat building typology. The precedent I chose to study was Groningen Hospital in Belgium. The project has 6 courtyards with 1 in each corner and 2 in the middle of the site. The addition of simple one-sided chamfer rectangle used in elevation and plan to create an object. The object pushes the typology out of the order and tilts up the ground in some places as well as dips down in the ground, allowing for the more connected experience and communal spaces. The punched-in windows with color facade creates the material typology for the project. The windows are projected in one direction, having more density at the bottom. At the corners, the window transform into ribbon windows, and at the top, they become skylights as they are stretched across the facade from one projection plane. To emphasize more on the punched-in effect, the material used is darker and more contrast. The elevation marks the new skyline, which is created by transformation of the object to the typology. The color seeps down and folds on the ground to create pathways along the lines of shadow projections. In August 2019, 4.7 million veterans, or 25% of the total, had a service-connected disabilities, and the government had added them to the list of getting in assisted living quarters. So to focus more on that problem, my project has assisted and nursing housing with hospital as its main program. The 2 buildings on the north, 1 building on the southeast have housing and the rest has medical facilities. There are multiple entrances and multiple circulatory cores to provide access to the upper floors. The upper floor plans try to mimic the precedent plan by having a single corridor planning system, and the plan shows how everything is connected even though the masses seems unconnected. This is the section on the north looking towards the south. This is the section on the north looking towards the this is the section of the south looking towards the north. The section focuses on the linearity of the interior spaces and how it tries to mimic the windows and not the tilt of the massing. This is the section cutting along the longer edge, and the section simultaneously reveals its interior and exterior profiles, the interior space being linear and shifts at some moments to complement the exterior. This is the top view of the physical model on the puzzle piece showing the lines of skylights over the massing. These slides captures the neighboring projects to give an idea of the urban density of the campus and tries to capture how connection works between each of the puzzle pieces. Thank you. I will just share Mural Board.
There's a clarity of approach. I'm looking at your first 3 diagrams up in the top corner, and the so you get I don't know that hospital. Is that old?
Yeah, a little old.
20th century, or is it like olden days?
No, it's not olden days.
And so you have that with an unusual configure. It's a very kind of a very unusual plan. And then you get these asteroids that come in and, you know, cause it to move. And so the question that I had earlier for one of your classmates was, what is the change after this other elements have been introduced and you have this typology? And this is, you know, even though you have the protruding bars, it is, as you mentioned, a series of courtyards, which is still in like Basel Rehab by Herzog and Demeron, if you know that. It's a square perimeter, but has a whole series of holes. You guys are both laughing. Maxie must have mentioned that. There, the chunks just land in the middle of the courtyard.
Yeah, I was looking at them, but we didn't like make them my precedents. But I was looking them in the initial studies.
You know what I do? I don't let my students say precedent, because that, first of all, it reminds me of like postmodern years when everything had to present the pedigree of your project. You can say there was a series of reference projects we were looking at. This is one of them. Because even that Groningen looks kind of like it. So what happens is, of course, and this is a modernist thing. You know, you have the idea of a court is that 4 walls touch the ground and you stand there and you have walls all around you. As an Italian American, you know, I never have a problem with a court. You know, I always think these are like cortiles, the beautiful thing. You lift them up, and so half of them are on the ground and half are open, which, you know, I mean, this is whether this is, you know, Korb or the Lever House, you know, the idea of having these things lifted is a kind of modern shift that happens, and yours kinds of does half and half. I would want to just a couple of things. I want to know more what those asteroids are doing. They sort of get lost in the plan. Some of them you don't quite have a cut through them. You know, like there seems to like needs more drawings of it to understand. I don't feel the same way I did about the inflated balloons in your classmates' project, where they should be removed. I think they have an important role here. But I'm just wondering what happens when courtyards all open and become U-shapes, and then up above their courtyards. Like that's one thing. The other thing is, and this is something that I've spent a lot of time kind of thinking about, which is, if you take a building form like this and you turn it this way, right? Can you see my hand? I'm just tilting it. If you cut a section through there, you expect all the floors to go that way as well. But somehow to stand on it, all the floors have to go horizontal. And there has to at least be a tension between those two things. You know, like what happens to, and I see you try in a couple of them to figure out how you can let the internal section, your Mural Board is just restarting.
Yeah, I think I'm having some problems.
To what you know, look, it looks like a crooked building, and you know, I'm not sure what that can be productive of, but there ought to be at least an acknowledgement when you look in the section that there's this difficulty between the fact that from the outside it looks like that and from the inside it doesn't. That's it. I don't know, you know, I don't think it needed the colors, actually. It makes it look like Legoretta, which is, I would never say is a positive attribute. And you give it certain, you say certain things about the color, but you know, the windows, probably not nearly enough windows for the program that you have. Virtually all the spaces are going to need windows, but I do appreciate the kind of old computer punch card look of it.
Yeah, the comment I was going to make, I think overall I like the project, and I think it's sort of seeing it carry through from the original sort of reference project to the finished one makes a lot of sense to me. I agree about the colors. It'd be nice if somehow it kind of clarified maybe a little bit more of the hierarchy of spaces somewhere in there. It's kind of hard to tell. Maybe that's intentional. There isn't particularly a hierarchy of courtyards or, you know, spaces in the building. But the kind of my main comment is sort of the diagrammatic plan. If you can go back to whatever, one of your earlier diagrams. I don't know which one it was on the mural board. It was in the top corner. Yeah, even so, those early diagrams, if you take that and then go to the last slide you had that showed your model next to your other, you know, other puzzle piece models in there.
Yeah.
I think the other, that one right there, where those buildings look like they're about to be, you know, 1 foot away from one another is where I want the plan to respond a little bit more. You took it as far as to show how these buildings will relate to one another on the site, which is great. I think it's important to do that and understand how these pieces fit together. But now that you know that, how does your building respond to what's next door to it? Is it taller, shorter? Does it pull back a little bit from that diagram in a certain way? You know, once you kind of show that data point of here's what the context looks like, then I want to see sort of what's your sort of opinion on how that is.
Okay.
I am curious about Andrew's comment as well. Lance, by the way, that is exactly what I think we'll kind of discuss at the end when we see some of these collections of buildings together, and to what degree the ground also plays a role, because obviously a project like this one, which is a mat, transformed itself into something a little bit more like a hovering monument, because it really left the ground plane. And I wonder a bit when Andrew is speaking about that kind of fifth surface of the quartz ground, whether or not that surface couldn't have somehow been brought up as well. So in other words, when I think of the courtyard scheme, I can't think of it as a 4-sided figure on the interior. I think of it as a 5-sided figure, which is to say, I want to add a line in the ground, in the section where the ground comes along for the ride, and somehow there's a liner on the interior of that court, to begin to make that relationship even more clear.
For what it's worth, Anna, I was slow on this one in part, but I feel like you've identified the big issue for me. I feel like the transformations of the reference building, not to say precedent, that they need to pay off in terms of how they modify those void spaces. I mean, the oddity of the original building is those 3- and 4-sided courtyards. And the way, you know, I wanted to believe that what forces were coming to bear on the original were somehow completely transforming and reinventing those. And I'm not confident they are yet. I feel like the forces have more to do with actually altering the logic of perimeter for the project.
Great. I think those are great comments, Nupur. I think there are some issues I think were brought up that I think have to do with the notion of these asteroids, how they crash against this, what you call the Korea type. That's still in my mind conceptually, I think, informally unresolved. But I do like all the kind of formal gymnastics and the way when the windows get close to the edge of these, very strict courtyard types, how they begin to kind of create a kind of hybrid edge in a way. I like how you wrestle with that notion in a way. But good job. Okay. We're going to see the last project, Essin, and we apologize for staying like 15 minutes longer to the jury.
I'll share my screen right now.
And sorry, Essin, and it sounds like the other group is also running a little bit late. So when they kind of come back to join us, I think it'll be exactly the right time. So Essen, go ahead.
So the cities are constructed territories with buildings as objects and landscapes. The typologies with definitions draw the map of the urban. They are separated, buildings and landscapes, insides and outsides, pochés and spaces. These defined edges of typologies become blurry when they exist, typologies that we know change in the urban context. The mountain belongs to the landscape. It's a part of the earth. Its surface is occupied, not its interior. But it was also occupied before. It was carved. So is the mountain a landscape, a building, or an object? The ruin was constructed as a building, had a program and a circulation. But when it's ruined, the only information that we have becomes the surface of it. We walk on it and try to explore it without knowing what's a wall and what's a floor. It's not occupiable anymore. Then is a ruin a building or a landscape? What happens when the built environment and the topography, the ground exchange their places and their urban acts? What kind of synthesis can exist when architecture finds itself overtaken by the ground? What would happen when we invert the way we build the cities and the hierarchical relationships? Or it's not occupiable anymore. Then is a ruin a building or a landscape? With the active archive and unmanaged field, the way we inhabit the space is subverted. Previously occupied, defined surfaces are now unmanaged fields, new places for gatherings, for agreements and disagreements with the archive, where it's decided to keep or recycle the information. The archive becomes a place for archiving the information, keeping them and recycling their physical materials, the hard drives and papers. The information and data we keep are no longer hidden and closed, but they are visible in multiple ways, as opposed to the existing archives. The recycling columns and the cooling tower of the archive become a part of the constructed landscape. There is no main entrance for this space, but different ways to move from the site to the inside. The space for data archive, where the most important information is kept, is not inside, but in the space between the bottom edge of the constructed landscape and the ground. The floor becomes a space for living, which is occupied by the researchers. Where the inside is for the information that we keep or recycle, it's also inhabited by people. The in-between spaces, which are both belong to the inside and outside, the spaces between the ground and the landscape are also inhabited. With the inversion of the urban construction, new ways of seeing the space become possible. It's no longer important to have a path or a direction, but the inhabition of the new spaces becomes important. As an unbuilding of the project, new space types appear, where we walk in, on, under, and above them. The new space conditions become a part of the constructed landscape through their programs. The old columns become the vertical structures to recycle the materials, which are visible on the outside, but they can also be watched from the inside, from the watching areas. The tower becomes the cooling tower for the data archive. The previously occupied floor now becomes the place for water, not for humans. And humans move around it horizontally and vertically through the tower, which is a part of the new landscape. With the new synthesis, materials create their own fictions. The vegetation grows inside the surfaces of the landscape, but it also becomes possible to reshape the surface for the future use of landscape. The materials, in a smaller scale, show how landscape can be materialized in a fictional, but also a physical way. As another way to build the project physically, the mountain objects material, the sandstone, is used to 3D print. And different physically built models with different ways and materials also show different readings of the spaces. So what happens when the built environment and the topography, the ground, exchange their places and their urban acts? And what would happen when we invert the way we build the cities and hierarchical relationships? Thank you.
Did you show us where on the site this was?
So I didn't include the site name, but I can't move here, but it's in the place where there are two wellness centers. I had the site plan here. It's here.
Okay, gotcha.
That's the mysterious quadrant. Things that are textured and nice to see you, Essen. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. What is the archive?
So it's an active archive and also an unmanaged field. So it's
archive, and what's the second thing?
Oh, unmanaged field. So with a place without a program where people can. So it's not defined, but it's also a part of the program too.
And what are the archives?
It's for it's a place where we decide to keep or recycle the information that which comes to the veterans campus.
So it's an archive of the better administration history, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Essen, it's really, I was just laughing out loud. I mean, your answers are beautiful because it's, you know, the veteran administration also, it's just such a difficult kind of bureaucracy, and one that has come under also a lot of scrutiny and many lawsuits. And you know, I'm sure Lance knows the kind of the ins and outs of some of these things. And then of course your building is both the kind of storage system for some of those things that are probably often redacted, but also you're saying that the program is also no program at all. It's a kind of non-site or a non-place. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to your images, whether you see them as kind of pragmatic, bureaucratic, utopian, dystopian. What kind of place is this?
So I was trying to explore this space with these images too. So I didn't know, I didn't decide it before I was doing them. So for example, these images, this one, I was trying to understand the space more in a three-dimensional way where we can see the inside of this archive, but also the surface of this archive where we can just move around.
I think I'm not sure if this is 100% your intention, but Anna, your comment about Kafka sort of triggered a whole sort of irony to me, which is very interesting given, you know, government agencies and archives and what gets kept and what doesn't get kept, and the fact that even kind of in the top, whatever that is, top left corner, rendered kind of it's kind of rendered with this sort of fog or something on top of it to give it a little bit of mysticism in my mind. Not entirely sure if that's what you were going for, but it reads in that fashion to me. And as Andrew Zago said, you know, sort of the lost quadrant over there in the corner, it all somehow ties itself together nicely. I'm not entirely sure if that was the plan, but it all kind of hits on all the marks when you're doing that.
I apologize for stepping away. So I'm not sure. I apologize if my thought has already been touched on, but I'm looking at that big rendering, and I guess Maxi, it relates a little bit to a comment of yours yesterday. I'm wondering if John Sohn is on your mind, because you know this one, the whole kind of the archive in ruins and the kind of allusions to his Bank of England, that famous Bank of England in ruins view is so evident here. I mean, it's interesting to me that this kind of the old and the new not exactly colliding, but sort of passing in the night in terms of their methodologies or the modes of representation here are interesting to me. I feel like there's a sensibility to this project that I haven't often seen at SCI-Arc, which I appreciate. That and an odd, in context, it reminds me that the VA campus is both very old by LA standards and incredibly recent by most global city standards, and that weird frisson of, anything approaching 100 years old in Los Angeles being archaeology, but anywhere else just being, the last wave of, the last wave of building. It's odd. But I do feel, and for better or for worse, I feel like this is both a compliment and a criticism. Almost all of my thoughts on this project are at the level of representation and the kind of aura of the work more than the organizational viability of it. The degree to which it is perhaps actually a bit of a one-person exquisite corpse in terms of how it came together. I feel like I can follow the logic of assembly, but not quite believe it in terms of how things would actually play out in it.
I think, sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
No, listen, my only, this is just advice, take it or leave it. I think you need like less mystical mystery. Less mystical mystery, more architecture.
One, I think, Essin, it's been a pleasure working with you. I think you brought amazing material here to work. I think the one thing that I found fascinating, which goes back to the whole setup of the studio when we looked at the funny collage city references. There are a lot there that point in some in contradicting directions, but the idea that one can bring a notion of the poche of a plan and understand that as a kind of at an urban scale, which I think you've done here, that one could inhabit that and could work with that kind of intricacy as a kind of almost as a fabric or as a pattern. I don't know what else to call it. To me, that's fascinating. I think the ruin, perhaps as a vehicle to work with that, it's an interesting device to instantiate that notion. How do you occupy those walls? How did that work? I'm also not entirely sure, but that's the whole the point. I think you brought some elements that I think are speaking to the kind of to the interfaces that I was interested in exploring. So I think that in that sense, I think that's an amazing job you've done.
Yes, thank you, Essin.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Anna, did the other bunch came back? We're all here now?
We're all here together now. Hi, Tom. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. So we have, maybe the next 40 minutes, we could open it up. And I wanted, we all wanted to look, now that we have seen some of the individual projects, to look at groups of buildings and even the entire campus as a kind of project in and of itself. This is really a conversation among students, among some of the guests who are able to stay a little bit longer, and all of us in regards to the studio as a whole. And we asked some of the students to collaborate and think of a couple of different ways of speaking about the campus as a kind of, holistic entity, as something that really binds some of this individual work together. We don't really have an order for the students. It's more coming from you, whoever wants to jump in and maybe take the mic, share with us some of your thoughts. Any group can go first. I think we thought that maybe 2 or 3 could share in the morning and then another 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So please introduce yourselves and share a screen and show us what you think you'd like to start with.
Dan, if you want to share your screen and start with infrastructure, I think the landscape group can follow yours.
Okay, I can start. Everybody wants.
That's one way to get us rolling.
Yep.
Maybe start out with the that image from Illustrator, or like the ground plan, just talking about how we were looking at them.
Yeah, so for people who missed my my presentation, essentially I'm proposing a series of bus stops throughout the campus, which will basically, you know, because a lot of the campus has all these grading misalignments, and between the different projects, or even just the topography as it stands, is like very unnavigatable for someone who has mobility issues. So a lot of what I'm trying to do is implement a kind of bus shuttle, which allows it, and it's sorry, it's like one of these. They can do off-road as well. So that way we can open up pedestrian paths and new roads without actually having to make them like car accessible. So there's a level of the campus in which is accessible by car, and there's a level of the campus which is only accessible by pedestrian and by these shuttle services.
And may I mention something? One way we were thinking about this idea was that the campus or society in general is going to get increasingly more full. So at some point, that's where Zane jumps in with the idea of buses that actually traverse the terrain. But what happens when accessibility for the VA is actually almost about expediency? And in one way, one of the things we were kind of struggling with, but it's a good topic, is how do we then decide on the clusters that do exist other than the existing roads?
Maybe I can present. So in Anna's studio, we were doing these kind of, we all did Beaux Arts buildings, and then we combined them into this big motherboard drawing. And this was like a simulation I was developing where kind of like new paths were generated just on how efficient they were. Like these agents would just like go through the plan and try to find the most efficient path, even though there's no streets in this plan. So there's an idea about kind of just like ad hoc urbanism, or a model that's like a little bit less about axial circulation and more about this kind of like smooth flow of everything all at once. So yeah, Terrence, maybe you can talk about the way we connected our sites. I can find it on the Mural Board. Terrence, you here? Terrence might not be here. But yeah, that's kind of the infrastructure, I guess. I don't know, what do you think, Kate?
Well, I'm just saying, we were thinking about it as dividing it by programs, but then that's kind of arbitrary because programs change all the time. So why would we do that? To, in a sense, say that, you know, one project then can support the other. So that's why I think that Zane's drawing with the lines regarding like expediency then can start dictating the clusters, instead of, maybe it's less about an aesthetic relationship and more about just transportation and access, because I think the site is already complicated enough to begin with. So how do we simplify it, especially when we're when we're adding all these extremely dense projects, which you just saw.
Yeah, so I was working in, oh man, I was working in like physical or like composited models, in which I was taking kind of, because we overlaid all these models together, I was able to take these photographs and then overlay them with kind of new things. So like A3 is a new site connected to F2s. These would not be normally connected. And then F1 and F2 are normally connected. So it's an idea that kind of the bus stop and the type of topography, like the ramp and the grading, can actually combine projects that yeah, wouldn't otherwise be connected.
Very clear, thank you. Should we go through all three groups and then we open it up for discussion so we see everything that you've put together?
I think that's a good idea, Anna.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that's good.
Cole, you want to go now?
Yeah, sorry, I just ran over here. I was getting water. Okay, Zane, if you could hover over to our map, please.
Maybe you want to share screen.
Oh, I'll share the screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. I'm being silly here.
I feel like I'm gonna show the wrong thing.
Okay, just one moment, everybody. We're buffering. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing about the pedagogy of the studio that we were really found kind of fascinating is that these pairings, these affinities were formed sort of, say after a fact. Everybody had their own concept in mind in the beginning, but I think one thing we discovered as we saw all the projects come together is, say, this affinity about, like, I don't know, the artifice of landscape. At least 3 projects we have here kind of dealt with that condition in 3 different ways. And I could start by just describing, maybe one important thread is how we think about the material or materiality, say, of the landscape. I can talk about mine really quickly. And this is all kind of, I thought about this as I worked on it, but the thought actually came after the fact. So I have this quote posted from Tristan Garcia's book titled Form and Object, something other than a thing. And I love it because when I was working on this, the intention was always to make something that could multiply the way in which an object could present itself through the associations you make to it. We have like the hen, the Japanese candy, the sea slug that's dried, and then a photo of the actual VA campus, like just a building facade. I was over there taking photos of these models. I don't know, it helped me realize, like, the way you nickname a project can reveal a lot, which yields other qualities that you can associate with it. And then the way that the project dealt with landscape specifically is just like, all right, we have a thick mud condition. Let's just make it discrete. And that's, say, this component right here. That I had a friend and they're like, dude, that looks like a sea slug. I was like, yeah, it's brilliant. I love it. So yeah. Okay. This one.
Okay, so my project is a cemetery. So I think, you know, the role of kind of like landscape here plays a kind of very like literal kind of part of, you know, actually going into the ground and like burying the cemetery. And this is essentially kind of, for those of you that were in the presentation earlier, like there's these layers of burial niches along the walls, and this memorial in the middle, which connects to the landscape. So it's, in a way, it's like it's connecting the landscape to the bodies as they are, you know, suspended below the ground. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at quarries and kind of like mines as a way to like deal with the ground condition.
I just put in the chat, I think that's the corner where we're just looking at. And Andrew, what did you call it? I
didn't call it the creepy corner, but what I call it?
Mystical corner.
Mystical, yeah. Creepy.
Mystical, not creepy. But do you have a representation of those 3 together as a kind of site? Because
right next to it.
Yeah, we're all next to each other. Yeah.
That would be interesting. And then the parcel on the left that's left empty, is that just part of the park with lots of trees? So it would be actually it would be part of the quadrants, I think.
That's free on site.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's in here?
Yes, I'm here. So I was interested in, so we usually define the urban typologies as landscape versus buildings, but when we look at it more, it becomes more blurry. So I was trying to understand, I was trying to immerse them to understand how we can understand these things in different ways. So these are just some tests and like a collection of spaces, which I was playing with.
Yeah, I mean, I just realized this as Andrew pointed it out. You know, this is like for some reason these 3 projects that are dealing with like the ground and landscape ended up being like you described it, like mystical, or there's like a certain kind of like poetics to the project in itself, which I think might be an interesting connection.
Great to see them all next to each other in this view. And could we see the next group? Just quickly.
the third group. Are you guys ready?
Stella Calvin.
We're in the afternoon group.
No problem. I think we can open it up, and if Sam is here, maybe at some point you could share your screen and show some of the. We were thinking that one group could show the kind of iconic views of some of the kind of taller structures, and that would be in the turntable model. And we can leave that for the next few minutes.
Is the third group not ready, or what happened to it?
Silence.
Hey, Stella, are you guys not ready, or what's going on?
Oh no, we are, but I thought we were going on the afternoon. So there's a third group.
Oh, okay, so it's not you. Okay, never mind.
No, it's not us. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Who is the third group?
I mean, I have an image on the Mural Board. It's not a group. It's just the image of kind of the overall site. With,
I took a picture yesterday. The third group is Jackie, Danielle, Allison. That's what I have on here.
I put an image. I could just talk about it, honestly. If nobody's jumping in, I'll take over. It's really just like connecting the project to the overall site and kind of what's surrounding it.
Sounds good. You want to share your screen?
Yeah. I mean, maybe this could be more of an open discussion, but I mean, it's just like kind of showing the view of the project, not just relating to neighboring sites or neighboring kind of projects, but also relating to the context of the VA campus being the 405 Wilshire Boulevard, and just kind of more of a zoom out view project. I don't know. I was hoping there would be like a discussion, but
yeah, I was hoping there's more than one. The point here was to show like multiple, but anyways, I think that's fine. Maybe we'll just move on to the discussion. That's cool. Thanks.
Is there some way you guys to put those model photos up of these different groupings? Because it's kind of confusing just looking at the projects one by one. I wonder, yeah, at least some imagery. I thought it was the model photographs that shows the different groupings. Because that seems worthy of discussion. It's just not clear to me where they are on this mural.
There's also a turntable of everything that's on. Maybe we can show that as well.
I mean, something, now that the groups have joined back up again, something that I was mentioning in our other group was that, we kind of had an ongoing discussion about the status of the sort of whether or not this is in fact an exquisite corpse. And what is it? What is the exact strategy here? Because for some students it was more like a collage approach where, well, not even a collage approach. It was kind of an autonomous approach where they filled out their puzzle piece without knowledge of what was going on with their neighbors, particularly before midterm. And then, I think that's the point where, when we slammed it all together and essentially built the puzzle at midterm, then I think we all became more conscious of what was going on in the thing as a whole. And these groups that we're kind of trying to look at, I think some of those, definitely had some feedback and some negotiation. I would say, generally speaking, though, that there wasn't a whole lot of that. There were some very subtle maneuvers, and I'm hoping we can kind of address some of those. But I think there was, I noticed that there was really no interest among the students in larger ways of sort of fusing this project together across multiple puzzle pieces. And rather that the interest was in sort of, moving beyond those kinds of ideas of urbanism or urban planning towards this sense of sort of the discrete site and the independent site. And I don't know how, you guys students, in the end feel about that. But I thought it was really interesting to see like how, I guess somehow I thought, particularly, in you guys' generation, I thought, because you guys are so good at collaboration, I thought you might be a little bit less staunch in fending off, in defending your projects from any other kind of outside influence. But I think a lot of you decided to just, basically not to change very much in your project. And I thought that was very intriguing and interesting. I'm just curious to hear more about it, how you guys feel about that.
Can I just ask a technical question? The exquisite corpse, and I've known about the exquisite corpse for a very, very long time, and I'm trying to remember, because the one that you showed, Anna, I always thought it was a drawing where you fold up a piece of paper and you draw something. Then you fold down, the next person draws something, and they see the one before, but they don't know what's going to come after? Or do you every person just sees their own piece?
No, you'll see a connector, and then you draw what you think is the next part.
Yeah. But you don't see what you don't know.
You know what you. Right. You don't know what you're connecting to.
All you get are the limits of what was on the fold before you. So that's right.
Oh, you do get so do you cover what was done before?
Yes, you fold it over.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You fold it and you get only a sliver of what so you know what you're connecting to.
I see.
But the Michael Sorkin basically based this on his kind of city puzzle, or his it's loosely related to the exquisite corpse. It's not a literal.
Right.
That was done in a model form, and he has done it at SCI-Arc all over the place, right?
At City College, I would see those giant things live in real time getting developed.
Right.
But it's a different, because there was a lot of, I'm thinking of like exquisite corpse, palimpsests, and pentimento as three. Palimpsests are where you lay things over each other, and it seems like the Sorkin model was much more of a palimpsest. Pentimento is different, maybe like archaeology, where things at the earlier stage of things starts to show up, and because what it is with the exquisite corpse, maybe, and this maybe gets to what Tom's saying, it seems like the only thing that matters, but it matters a lot, is, and this is, I think, going back to Lance's question when we were meeting together, is where the two of them touch. So you would say it doesn't change my project at all, except the last 10 feet. That the last 10 feet of every project. So it's like, maybe, Zane, your job should have just been going through, and all you had were the seams between all of the sites, and that's all you have to do. But you can also change the buildings on either side of you, or something like that, because I think there is a when I see them all together, it's fascinating. But if I think of it as the kind of next step, as a sort of urban proposition, you want to just stop and say there's something else is needed here to allow these to negotiate themselves with one another. The other part that I would say, and it probably makes no sense, or it would probably be no way to implement it, would the fact that it's a grid and they're all the same size seems a bit not exquisite corpse, like it gives them all too much their own exactly the same backyard. I don't know what would be a practical way of changing it, but that would be my other observation about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if the way that the kind of exquisite corpse, at least how I see it, plays into here is the actual shape of the puzzle pieces that we're using. So they all have the little kind of like edges, right? The little paddles, where in certain spots they overlap with the neighbors. So like it's a kind of a weird, it's a blurry part, right? So like, do you design on your little edge? Do you just like make a rectangle out of it? And then if you do put something on your edge, like here you see it, like Zane, can you go to the image before?
Sorry,
well, so,
the same deal.
I think, but the one that I was showing, because there's a way where like essentially kind of like, I think for my project, I had designed something that was on my neighbor's, because I made a rectangle on that side, and I had designed something that was on my neighbor's side of the little edge, and then had to move it. So I think like those little edges are really what the exquisite corpse is here, because it's that little piece of information that you get from the person before you in the exquisite corpse, like the little edge where it's kind of an in-between of both, and you have to deal with it.
Yeah, I think that works better conceptually than in fact.
Yeah, could I kick in a little bit here, and in terms of the exquisite corpse strategy applied here, I really do think, and I miss Michael Sorkin dearly. It was the biggest loss of this year to me. But I do think that the exquisite corpse application here is a bit like it's a Manhattanism. It's a transposition of something close to Rem Koolhaas's Prisoners of Architecture diagram, with each block of Manhattan its own kind of chess piece. And I think one way the strategy of exquisite corpse might have played out, I agree with Andrew's skepticism about gridding here, but one very plausible way you could have, there's north-south divisions in Los Angeles. Had the logic of Cartesian division, or even the nature of boundaries between the parts, varied across, east-west as traffic tends to flow, and then north-south as topography tends to dictate in Los Angeles, you'd have ended up with a slightly different formula, which kind of heads you out towards the Rayner-Banham's four ecologies, and I think in that context, the veterans site is a really odd kind of conflagration of at least three of those ecologies, with the plains of Id lapsing into the foothills, traversed by Autopia, and it's pretty far west. You're almost at suburbia and all four. So, I think that, just maybe, I wonder if in a studio like this, I feel like we're having a conversation about what might have bridged between the Cartesianism of it, but I wonder if if some of you, those of you that really wanted a parcel to wrestle with, could have had your plains of Id, and your chess game across it. And some of the others might have taken, and I think Zane, your project really started to grapple with this pretty intensively, might have taken a kind of traverse logic. Because I think actually in many of those exquisite corpse games, there is the basic logic of incremental assembly, but there's also, different stranger things happen to those artifacts after that phase.
I'm sorry, just going to, not to monopolize the conversation. I was thinking of another Western reference. For some, the Beyond the 100th Meridian, which is Wallace Stegner's book on John Wesley Powell and the going through and mapping the Grand Canyon after the Civil War. And Wesley Powell also set up the U.S. Geological Survey. And one of the things that they talk about was the logic of land division in the West, that you have a Jeffersonian grid marching across the country and everybody can get a quadrant and it works fine. But suddenly when there's no water on your land and someone else is sitting on top of a river, the whole thing falls apart. And what he started to realize was you couldn't, this always really struck me, that you couldn't apply a grid on the West the way you can on other parts of the country. I'm making a giant leap to go from there to this site, but that maybe there's a kind of, you break it down in a way that's not a...
Well, the city zooms in according to what you just said, Andrew. I mean, actually, Los Angeles is a city of 82 municipalities for precisely that reason. It's a city of internal land grabs around resources different people needed and different exclusions. And one of the oddities of the VA site is that for the last, since its heyday in the 20s and 30s, it's been everybody's backyard land grab in its part of the city. So the kind of autonomy that the surrounding municipalities have achieved have often come at the cost, literally, with Brentwood School, stealing its parcel to build its building. The VA is an interesting, the analogy for the VA in the municipal power struggle of Los Angeles would be akin to the Native American struggle in various states for their territories.
And I think that's a wholly interesting argument as well, because if you look at the site, I mean, even before the entire west side of Los Angeles was incorporated into the city of Los Angeles, I mean, this has been sort of an isolated parcel, sort of distinct with its, it's not part of the county of Los Angeles, it's not part of the incorporated city of Los Angeles, it's federal property, autonomous from any sort of local governmental regulation structure. And if you look at it in that sense, it's as the city has grew from the streetcar suburbs in this metropolis, if you said, Joe, it's sort of remained this distinct grid, almost like a scar into the cityscape. And by the time the 405 was built, but in the 60s, that cuts through the site. I mean, it's interesting how, in a sense, it sort of almost remained, I would argue, it's almost remained almost like a museum piece. It's almost so isolated that the city around itself, it's grew, and this just remained the same through the centuries.
The piece that I kind of was thinking about relative to the design brief, and kind of we talked a little bit about in the reviews earlier, was sort of twofold. Sort of number one, sort of thinking about the puzzle city, and quite literally with everybody having their puzzle pieces. The element that was always, that's a little bit sort of, I think the next step on this is puzzles aren't white. Puzzles have images that overlap from one piece to another on them. And so as part of thinking about the urbanism of this entire site, I think it would be an interesting sort of wrinkle in there to have elements that span from one site to another that the students have to, respond to in some form or fashion, because it's the continuation of an image, it's the continuation of, whatever the piece is. But then sort of the second part of that is that sort of at the site scale, what to me what's interesting about the exquisite corpse idea is not the arm or the wing or any of the individual pieces, it's where they come together that, really is sort of where the sort of interest, kind of arises. That's kind of why I was asking the questions earlier about, when you see, one building abutting up against another building, what do you do about that? What information does that give you as a designer to think about how your building should respond to it, and how those elements come together and how they respond? If you're working on, any campus type of project, you have to sort of be at least cognizant of that context of, what's going on around me. And in particular, as I think I mentioned at the beginning, we're doing some work out on the VA campus right now, and just thinking about sort of the blending of historical buildings versus new buildings, site infrastructure, all these things. You have to be aware of all of those contextual pieces. You can't do it in an isolated, sort of manner of a fictitious property line around what you're doing, because the reality is that, whatever move you make is going to influence, what goes on next door, down the street, and vice versa. So just trying to fold those additional layers into, all the different, designs that were presented today, I think would just kind of add another interesting wrinkle to that.
I think there were moments when the puzzles came together and kind of like crossed arms was nice, but had the project or had the master plan not been gridded, I do think there would have been more opportunities for confetti to happen to that point.
Yeah, I think there was a kind of conflict between people having grids, but also trying to keep the original roads inside the campus. So a lot of, you'll see inside the master plan, there's all these original roads and original buildings that we were trying to keep. But then there's also a grid overlaid. So there's these kind of two methods of order, and that's kind of what causes this disconnect, I think. I don't know. But it also opens up new opportunities. Like some people completely ignore the roads, and then that becomes like a new pedestrian area or like a whole new district of the way we were planning the thing. So it's just kind of like ad hoc and like less overall planned thing.
I think also it's everyone wanted to use the entire puzzle piece. So at times it was just so condensed that, you know, as students we want to build, but it doesn't lead to like let any confetti happen. And it's fun though.
I think Kate and saying you open it a great point, which I think is the overlay of the, you know, the Western grid, in this case manifested as a puzzle piece, but that needs like campus architecture and campus infrastructure. And this is not the kind of Jeffersonian idea of a campus that one might find like more gridded, like in UVA or the more strict campus. This one has a lot of indulgences in terms of curves. There are a lot of, we call them the kind of banana buildings. There's a lot of kind of exuberance in terms of the order of the campus. So I find, you know, as a kind of question, like the puzzle map, it's not a legal boundary, right? So those are not like property lines, right? Neither the infrastructure itself provides legal boundaries, right? Because the campus is one land ownership. So I feel like it does create a lot of interesting notions about what is your boundary, what is your zone of intervention, how do you negotiate that interface, and how does it meet this very particular kind of urbanism that is the campus, which I think in this particular instance is kind of fascinating urban animal, which there isn't, I don't know, perhaps a ton of theory around that as a particular notion of city.
Here's just a weird thought. Now, this is maybe to you, Joe. Would Christopher Alexander be interesting to look at? And what's the campus again? Oregon?
Are you asking that as in a comprehensive sense?
Well, no, because he was master planning that campus in a way that's a very different kind of campus, and it had to do with a different kind of. There wasn't necessarily. I actually don't know. I don't know what.
No, I
just can imagine it's quite a different model for how you organize a campus. The Christopher Alexander.
Absolutely. It's funny, and maybe not that far, Andrew, from the image, Anna, in your introduction. The image that haunts me is that one of the Victorian houses, the one of the campus sort of, you know, completed in, I presume, the 20s or the 30s, in those kind of steroidal Victorian houses that pick up on a lot of the recent comments about it